Chapter 402. More importantly, Yunyi was currently pinning Qing Yu down on the sofa in a bashful manner. It was a scene that made one's imagination run wild. Ah! What are you doing? Get off me! Qing Yu's back was facing Yun Jian, so she did not notice Yun Jian. She must have been pinned down by Yunyi just now, so she blushed in embarrassment and pushed Yunyi away quickly. Yunyi sprang up as well, not expecting himself to accidentally fall towards Qing Yu. He even accidentally fell on top of her. In spite of it, the scene was different in Yun Jian's eyes. Yun Jian squinted and took a closer look, thinking that her brother, Yunyi, and Qing Yu did look like a married couple. Yunyi stood up awkwardly from Qing Yu and glanced at the door, noticing that it was open from the corner of his eye. Once again, he fixed his eyes on the door, and his heart, which had always been calm since he was a child, almost jumped out of his chest in fright. Xiao Jian? Why are you here? Yunyi thought about the awkwardness just now and how Yun Jian was looking at him and Qing Yu with her arms crossed. It looked like she had been standing there for quite some time. Yunyi was so embarrassed that he almost had no face left. He ran a hand through his hair, his cheeks flushing red like two clouds. Go, I'd like to ask why you're here. Yun Jian suddenly had the urge to tease Yunyi. Looking at how flustered Yunyi was, Yun Jian felt like she had never seen her brother like this before. Yun Jian suddenly recalled how Zhang Xiaofan and her brother had come to her one morning to ask for Qing Yu's address after training them. She recalled how her brother was drugged by Chen Yubing and ended up lying on the same bed with Qing Yu out of the blue, hugging each other naked. Yun Jian's hand that was crossed over her chest suddenly stroked her chin. She narrowed her eyes at Yunyi and Qing Yu with a subtle smile. Xiao Jian, it's not what you think. I really didn't do anything to her. Yunyi ran his fingers through his hair and stuttered as he explained to Yun Jian. Go, I didn't think too much. Yun Jian forbade herself from teasing Yunyi. She chuckled and walked in to snatch Qing Yu's sofa to sit beside the latter, who had her head lowered and buried in her knees in embarrassment. Suddenly, Yun Jian stretched her hand, unable to resist teasing Qing Yu and peeking over to look at her. It was rare for her to be so expressive as she called out to Qing Yu with a giggle. Sister-in-law. The term sister-in-law sent a shiver down Qing Yu's spine. Slaying God, the top secret agent in the international ranking, the chief boss of Wuxia mercenaries, was calling her sister-in-law? Sister Jian, don't tease me. Qing Yu kept her head down. There was a smile on her lips, but her cheeks were flushed. Alright, I'll stop teasing you guys. Yun Jian smiled and stood up to turn to look at Qing Yu, telling her, go back with me in 3 days. The destination was none other than the headquarters of Wuxia mercenaries. Yun Jian's words made Qing Yu's rosy smile fade as she nodded at Yun Jian. Go back where? Yunyi was baffled. To travel. It's winter break now. I'm bringing my future sister-in-law out to have some fun, but I'm not bringing you, go. Yun Jian smiled at Yunyi. Her smile was mesmerizing. Chapter 403. Qing Yu and Yunyi, on the other hand, were blushing. Their rosy and fair faces were indescribable with words. It was only after Qing Yu made sure that Yun Jian had left that she snapped out of it and pushed Yunyi, mumbling. Why did you do that to me just now? Sister Jian even saw it. Qing Yu shoved Yunyi angrily and turned to face him with a pout, no longer watching the Calabash brothers on the TV. I just slipped. I didn't expect to fall on you, Yunyi said awkwardly as he rubbed his nose, feeling a little bitter at the same time. Humph, I'm ignoring you. Go. I won't be able to face Sister Jian if she sees me again, Qing Yu said as she turned to give Yunyi a light pat on his back. In spite of it, her tone sounded like a girl's whining to Yunyi. Yunyi's brow was raised to its peak while he squinted his eyes, looking extremely pleased. Especially when Yun Jian called Qing Yu sister-in-law just now, he felt like he was on cloud 9. It was inexplicably exhilarating. "I'm leaving then." Yuni stood up with a smirk, a sly grin spreading across his face. When Yuni reached the door, he suddenly turned back to tell Qingyu, who was ignoring him sulkily, "I'm leaving. Tonight's dinner is in the stove. Remember to eat and tidy up the house. A girl's house can't be so messy. If I'm not here to tidy up for you next time, eat on time. Don't forget to eat because you're watching Calabash Brothers all day." As he spoke, Yuni pretended to leave. Yuni went to the door. He gave his silent permission for 3 seconds before Qingyu's voice came from behind him. "Wait. You're not coming anymore." Yunyi's back was facing Qingyu. He suddenly smirked and turned around, the smile vanishing instantly. Yuni looked at Qingyu and said with a straight face, "That's right, didn't you ask me to leave? Then I'll take my leave." Qingyu pouted and looked at Yuni. She bit her lip and said to Yuni, "Then you better not leave." He had been looking for her ever since Yuni tidied up her room that day. Qingyu had been quietly accepting Yunyi's kindness. Today, Yuni had prepared dinner for her and accompanied her to watch Calabash Brothers. She did not expect that he would slip and fall onto the sofa. Coincidentally, Yun Jian, who had suddenly come over, saw the scene. Yuni smirked at Qingyu's words. He already knew this would happen. Yuni then walked over to Qingyu. Yun Jian left Qingyu's house and went home. It had been a few days since she last saw Ce and she could not help missing him. In spite of it, he seemed to have returned to the organization because Adam and Emosen were nowhere to be seen. They had probably followed him back. Just as she got home, she saw Qin Yiru. "Xiao Jian, you're back?" Qin Yiru asked Yun Jian with a grim look. Yun Jian nodded and asked when she saw Qin Yiru's odd expression, "Mom, what's wrong?" Qin Yiru answered directly, "Xiao Jian, do you remember your best friend, Lu Fian, from Xinjiang town? Just now, I ran into a fellow villager from Xinjiang town when I was shopping at the market. I heard from her that something happened to your friend Lu Fian's family. When her father went to the school to help, he accidentally dropped a long pole from the 3rd floor, and it stabbed a student to death. The student's parents sent her father to jail and forced Fian to drop out of school. They even said that if Fian dared to go back to school in the future, she would pay for her father's life and stab her to death too." Chapter 404. Qin Yiru's tone was laced with a deep sigh and helplessness. She had bumped into her hometown friend when she went to the market to buy groceries at night and chatted excitedly before her friend brought it up. In the end, he asked the poor girl who she was from Xinjiang town. He would not have known if he did not ask, but when he did, he was shocked. Her hometown friend told Qin Yiru right away that the poor girl who had suffered for nothing was called Lu Fian. Lu Fian. Qin Yiru was stunned when she heard it. Lu Fian was her daughter's best friend in Xinjiang town. Moreover, Lu Fian often came to her house to look for her daughter, Yun Jian. Qin Yiru and Lu Fian had met each other many times as well. Especially when Lu Fian treated him so politely. She was a very good girl. Qin Yiru panicked when she heard it. She was such a good girl, how could she have met with such a sinner? Considering Xiao Jian and Lu Fian's relationship, Qin Yiru had been frowning ever since she got home. Since Yun Jian asked, she told her directly. In spite of it, Qin Yiru knew that she could not help with such matters because she was not a high-ranking official. She could only shake her head and sigh. When Yun Jian first heard Qin Yiru's words, her eyelids twitched. The image of Lu Fian rebutting the teacher for her when she had just been reborn surfaced in Yun Jian's mind. There was also the encounter with the cobra in the park. The last thing the silly girl did in her panic was to block the cobra's attack for her. Later on, the girl promised her that they would enroll in the same high school together. Although Yun Jian had returned to Xinjiang town to visit Lu Fian, her stay was short. In spite of it, Lu Fian's figure lingered in her mind. Lu Fian was Yun Jian's first friend after her rebirth, so it meant a lot to her. Xiao Jian. Xiao Jian. Xiao Jian, what's wrong? Did you hear what Mom said to you? Qin Yiru waved her hand in front of Yun Jian's eyes. She thought that Yun Jian was stunned by the sudden news, so she quickly asked. Yun Jian snapped back to reality. She looked up at Qin Yiru and asked, Nothing. Mom, what did you just say? Xiao Jian, go back to the village tomorrow and check on Fian. Here's 2,000 yuan, bring it to her too. I'm not capable, I can only help her a little. Qin Yiru pulled out a cowhide envelope out of nowhere and stuffed the bulging envelope into Yun Jian's hand. This 2,000 yuan was all of Qin Yiru's salary that she had saved up since she started working. Other than the meager living expenses that she had to spend, Qin Yiru had put almost all of her savings into this leather envelope. This was Qin Yiru's token of appreciation. Yun Jian nodded and accepted the envelope. Since Lu Fian's family was in such a big mess, Yun Jian had to go back no matter what. A friend that Yun Jian had set her mind on would never change. The next morning, Yun Jian boarded the bus back to Xinjiang town before the sun had even risen. She was carrying a simple backpack. This backpack was already a little shabby. Even the color of the backpack was the kind that couldn't be more faded after being washed. The cowhide envelope that Qin Yiru gave her was in the backpack. Chapter 405. Yun Jian had been to Lu Fian's house several times before. Lu Fian's family background was one of the best in Xinjiang town. Both of his parents were retired teachers, and every month, he received a decent amount of pension. Therefore, Lu Fian's house was beautifully decorated. At least compared to the houses in the village, it was one of the most outstanding houses. In the past, when Yun Jian came to Lu Fian's house, it was always clean and tidy. However, it was a mess outside the house now. Taking a closer look, Yun Jian saw many bright red words painted in red. They were scrawled on the walls around Lu Fian's house. A life for a life, right and proper. You killed my son, give me back my son's life. What kind of teachers are you? Go to hell. This originally white and unadorned outdoor wall was now covered by a pile of curses written in red. Even passers-by could tell that these words were written by the family's enemies. Yun Jian knew the details. She immediately understood that these words were written by the students' parents who were accidentally stabbed to death by Lu Fian's father. Yun Jian's eyes darkened. She carried her backpack and stood in front of Lu Fian's house. Reaching out, Yun Jian knocked on the door. No one answered. Yun Jian raised her hand again and knocked. Young lady, you're here to look for this family, right? An old lady's voice suddenly came from behind. Yun Jian turned around and saw an old lady in her 70s or 80s standing behind her. She was even holding a stove for warmth. Yun Jian nodded. She frowned, feeling slightly uneasy. They've gone to the police station. Young lady, go to the police station and look for them. Sigh, what a sin. After the old lady said that, she shook her head and sighed softly. She turned around and left with the stove. The old lady had only come over to remind Yun Jian out of kindness. With this reminder, Yun Jian immediately knew what was going on. Lu Fian and her mother could not sit still when Lu Fian's father was already locked up in Xinjiang town's police station. It was reasonable for Lu Fian and her mother to go to the police station. Thankfully, Xinjiang town's police station was not far from here. Yun Jian carried her backpack and walked there in no time. In the waiting room of the police station, Yun Jian saw Lu Fian and her mother. Lu Fian had lost a lot of weight. She looked pale and weak, and her hair was messy as if she hadn't combed it for days. She sat on the chair in the waiting room, staring at the floor in silence with her mother. It wasn't until Yun Jian came in front of LV Fian and showed her the shoes that LV Fian raised her head to take a look. Then, she saw Yun Jian. Xiao Jian. Lu Fian pressed her pale lips together and called out softly as tears streaked down her cheeks. Yun Jian walked over and hugged Lu Fian's frail body. She reached out and patted Lu Fian's back. This was the only way to comfort her. More tears flowed down Lu Fian's cheeks. Her mother who stood beside her was like a weeping doll, staring blankly at the floor without a sound. When Lu Fian recovered, Yun Jian helped her to a seat far away from her mother. Lu Fian then cried and told her about what she had been through these few days. Lu Fian's father was invited by the principal to help out in school that day. He was a retired teacher after all, and Lu Fian's father was getting on in years. Chapter 406. As the principal of the school that Lu Fian's father had been in for half his life was a distant relative of hers, Lu Fian's father was too embarrassed to reject and went. In the end, a tragedy happened. When Lu Fian's father was helping to move a long pole, he was accidentally bumped into by someone on the third floor. The pole slipped and he fell from the window on the third floor. A classmate happened to pass by downstairs, and the pole pierced through the classmate's head, killing him on the spot. The person who bumped into Lu Fian's father and caused the pole to fall from the third floor was a young teacher with the surname Su. When this teacher Su saw the incident, he refused to admit that he had bumped into Lu Fian's father. He even stood up and said that Lu Fian's father was careless and caused the tragedy. That distant relative, the principal of the school, was also unwilling to clarify the matter after seeing the incident. The result was that Lu Fian's father was to blame for all of this. Lu Fian also said that after the incident, Lu Fian's father was arrested and sent to the police station. The parent of the classmate who was killed had been making a fuss. That classmate's parent even held a kitchen knife and did not allow Lu Fian to go to school. He said that if Lu Fian dared to go to school, he would chop her to death for her father's debt. Therefore, Lu Fian had been staying at home for the past few days, looking haggard. When a person really needed help, those who could lend a helping hand were truly people worth befriending. Just then, a male police officer in uniform suddenly walked out of the police station. Lu Fian and her mother stood up. "This case hasn't been solved yet. Our chief said that you're not allowed to visit relatives. You should leave first." The male police officer waved at Lu Fian and her mother and turned to leave. "Police officer, I beg you. Help us, just let us take a look, just one look, okay?" Lu Fian's mother, who had been silent all this while, suddenly sprung up like a spring. She rushed forward and grabbed the male police officer's hand as she begged humbly. Go away, go away. I said no means no. Unless you get the higher-ups to sign off, you're not allowed to enter." The male police officer waved his hand impatiently. Lu Fian was anxious as she watched, tears streaming down her face. She and her mother had been waiting here for a long time. Ever since Lu Fian's father was sent to the police station, they had not seen him once. The reason given by the police station was that the case was not solved yet. "As long as the higher-ups sign off, we can visit?" Just as the male police officer impatiently pushed Lu Fian's mother, a female voice was heard. The police officer was taken aback before he saw Yun Jian, who was making her way over slowly. Thinking that he was an honorable police officer, he looked up at Yun Jian with a lowered gaze and nodded. "That's right, as long as the higher-ups give their approval." Yun Jian pressed her lips together and slid her backpack down, grabbing it in her palm. "What are you doing?" "Comms, loses, of course, to, it, of Lu. 2. With one look, he was instantly dumbfounded. Yun Jian's name and gender were written on the top of the document. Below it was a note, Advanced Special Forces official member. There was another note, Advanced Special Forces highest officer, personally issued by Gu Junjian. This document, the male police officer was dumbfounded. He looked at Yun Jian and was speechless, his teeth chattering. You're an Advanced Special Forces soldier?" Officer GE's Advanced Special Forces soldier? That's the top force in the country. How old was she? She was actually a member of the Advanced Special Forces. The male police officer's jaw almost fell off. Chapter 407. Yun Jian had actually become an Advanced Special Forces soldier? When did she become an Advanced Special Forces soldier? Lu Fian was dumbfounded. Even Lu Fian's mother, who had been in a daze all this while, lifted her eyes and looked at Yun Jian in shock. The male police officer was dumbfounded. His hand that was holding the ID trembled as if he had seen something incredible. Other things aside, Yun Jian's document was definitely not forged. More importantly, Gu Yunjian's Advanced Special Forces was the top force in the country. Moreover, all members of the Advanced Special Forces had special privileges in Country Z. With the document personally stamped by Gu Yunjian, it meant that Yun Jian's status was much higher than that of the male police officer's position in the police station. At the same time, as long as the Advanced Special Forces soldiers had this document, they could be considered as having been sent by their superiors to carry out missions. In other words, no matter where the Advanced Special Forces soldiers went to in Country Z, as long as they were in Country Z, they had the right to get the local police station to cooperate with them. Yun Jian had such special privileges. This was also one of the main reasons why Yun Jian had joined the Advanced Special Forces back then. This document was given to Yun Jian by Gu Yunjian not long after she and the others had completed their first mission. The male police officer had gone from being arrogant earlier to trembling slightly now. His gaze towards Yun Jian had changed. Changing his arrogant attitude from earlier when he thought he was a police officer, the male police officer took 2 steps towards Yun Jian. He suddenly flashed a smile as if he was flattering his superior and returned Yun Jian's document to her. So now, can we allow them to visit their relatives? Yun Jian took her document back from the male police officer's hand and smiled. The male police officer quickly nodded like a rattledrum. His attitude had changed a little too quickly. He even pointed at the prison beside them and said, "Please, I'll bring you there now." The change in the policeman's attitude shocked Lu Fian and her mother. Ever since Lu Fian's father was arrested, Lu Fian and her mother had been coming to the police station every day to plead with them to let them see Lu Fian's father. However, the people at the police station did not allow it. They even used the reason that Father Lu was a murderer and said that they were not allowed to visit before the case was solved. This cycle had been going on for a long time. Just as Lu Fian and her mother were about to give up hope that the police would allow them to visit Father Lu, Yun Jian appeared. Moreover, Yun Jian merely took out a certificate and the male police officer immediately changed his attitude. He did not even ask the chief and directly brought them to visit Father Lu. This piece of news was undoubtedly the best news that Lu Fian and her mother had heard since the incident. "Xiao Jian, thank you. Thank you." Lu Fian looked at Yun Jian with tears in her eyes. She hugged Yun Jian again and thanked her gratefully. "Go on, I'll wait for you outside." Yun Jian patted Lu Fian's back and told her softly, "Amen." Lu Fian nodded fervently and held her mother's hand to follow the male police officer to the prison. Yun Jian did not follow them in. She stood outside and waited for a while. About an hour later, she saw Lu Fian helping her mother out with tears streaming down her face. "Have you seen him?" Yun Jian asked Lu Fian looking at her mother who was in tears. Chapter 408. Yun Jian took in Lu Fian's reaction as well. She knew the girl's pain, so she did not say much. No one would feel good if they were to encounter such an incident. Moreover, although Lu Fian's father did not kill on purpose, he had killed someone by accident. Even if he did not deserve death, he would be sentenced to life imprisonment based on the current situation. Lu Fian's family, in particular, had no power or influence other than not living in poverty. It was said that the father of the student whom Lu Fian's father stabbed was a prominent figure in Xinjiang town and even in Longmen City. Not only was he rich, but he was also powerful. It was not hard to guess that the reason why the police did not allow him to visit his family after Lu Fian's father was imprisoned was probably because the parent who was stabbed by Lu Fian's father had taken over the police force. Take auntie home to rest for a bit. Yun Jian told Lu Fian when she saw that Lu Fian's mother was not in good condition and went over to help her. Lu Fian nodded and repeated her earlier words gratefully. Xiao Jian, thank you. I really have to thank you today. If it wasn't for you, Mom and I wouldn't have been able to see Dad. At the mention of her father, who was still suffering in prison and whose aged face had obviously lost a lot of weight, LV Fian felt as if she was at a loss for words. Lu Fian's father was a righteous man who was always willing to help others. After he retired, he would gladly oblige any acquaintances who asked him for help. He was quite kind. Sometimes, though, kind-hearted people got into trouble easily. Lu Fian's father was exactly like that. After the incident, the principal who asked Lu Fian's father for help and teacher Su who bumped into him and caused his bamboo pole to slide down from the third floor had both gone into hiding out of fear of trouble. Therefore, Lu Fian's father shouldered all the responsibility. Yun Jian patted Lu Fian's back and helped her mother up to make their way to the Lu family. Clang! Clang! Clang, clang, clang. On the way back to the LV family, there was only one more turn before they reached the LV family's residence. Quang quang quang, the sound of someone knocking on the door was suddenly heard. The voice came from the Lu family. Lu Fian's mother shuddered. Lu Fian's face also turned pale. Lu Fian's mother quickened her pace and ran towards the door. Although Yun Jian didn't know why, she suddenly remembered the words that were scrawled in red paint on the surrounding mud walls outside the Lu family's house. She had some understanding in her heart, so she followed Lu Fian and Lu Fian's mother. After turning the corner, the main gate of the Lu family came into view. At this moment, Yun Jian's eyes narrowed. She frowned slightly as she looked at the front door of the Lu residence. A few people were smashing the door with hoes used by farmers. One of them was an old man who looked to be in his 60s or 70s. He was smashing the door with a hoe. He was cursing and yelling in a mournful manner. My grandchildren, my pitiful grandchildren, get the hell out here. Get out here. What kind of retired teacher is this? You killed my grandson, so I'll make your daughter pay with her life. From the old man's words, Yun Jian could tell that he was probably the grandfather of the student that Father Lu had accidentally stabbed to death. Chapter 409. In reality, Yun Jian's guess was right. This old man with a hoe and a group of people was the grandfather of the student who was stabbed to death by Father Lu. The reason why Mother Lu was so flustered was because of this old man's rudeness. The innocent student was called Zhang Qin. He was a 12-year-old boy and was a 5th grader. With regards to Zhang Qin's death, Father Lu was dispirited. Father Lu had always been on the right path and had never taken the wrong path. Even after being a teacher for his whole life, he was still humble. Father Lu would be condemned by his conscience for the rest of his life for accidentally killing a student in school. On the other hand, Zhang Qin's grandfather was a farmer without any culture. After Zhang Qin's death, Father Lu's grandfather turned the wrongful death of Father Lu into hatred. Even when Lu Fian was still in school, Father Lu had wanted to chop her to death with a hoe. According to Father Lu had killed his grandson. A life for a life, and Father Lu had insisted on killing Lu Fian. Father Lu had been crying and scolding in front of the Lu family's house every day. After the winter break, Lu Fian did not dare to go out. Other than going to the police station to beg the police to visit Father Lu, Lu Fian did not dare to go out. Because the moment she went out, Father Lu would bring a group of people to kill her. There was once when Lu Fian was a step slower and would have been stabbed in the stomach by Father Lu. That time, Lu Fian's down jacket was torn apart, revealing a huge hole. It wasn't that Lu Fian didn't know how to protect herself, but when she complained to the police about Zhang Qin's grandfather's behavior of transferring his hatred to her, the reason given by the police was that Lu Fian had to show evidence. There was no reason to talk nonsense. Lu Fian and Lu Fian's mother also felt that the police officers were most likely bribed by Zhang Qin's father. Now, even if they called for help, there was no one to help them. But who told them to have no power or influence? They could only hide as much as they could. "Mom, let's go." When Lu Fian heard that, she hurriedly grabbed Mother Lu and Yun Jian with her other hand and wanted to hide. All of this happened in a split second. When Lu Fian's mother and Lu Fian's conversation ended, they had already run to the corner to hide. At the entrance of the Lu residence, someone from Zhang Qin's grandfather's group had already noticed Yun Jian and the other two. "There they are!" someone shouted. Zhang Qin's grandfather immediately turned around. He furrowed his brows fiercely and rushed over with a hoe in his hand. Zhang Qin's grandfather was an authentic farmer. Because he was uneducated and didn't know the law, and because Zhang Qin's grandfather had lived in his youth, he had always relied on himself to solve problems. His own grandson had been killed, and Zhang Qin's old-fashioned way of thinking told him that he had to kill the other party's daughter to avenge his grandson. Momentarily blinded by hatred, Zhang Qin's grandfather raised his hoe and charged towards Lu Fian and her mother. His speed was abnormally fast. "You deserve to die. Damn it." "Ah!" Zhang Qin's grandfather completely ignored him and rushed over with a group of people. Most of these people were uncultured villagers like Zhang Qin's grandfather. They did not know that every injustice had its perpetrator and every debt had its debtor. They also did not know that such things were handled by the law and the police. "Run, the two of you run." Mother Lu saw that it was too late. She pushed Lu Fian and Yun Jian, wanting to use her body to block Zhang Qin's grandfather who was rushing over. Chapter 4:10. Seeing that Zhang Qin's grandfather was about to reach them with a hoe, Yun Jian's mother pushed Lu Fian and Yun Jian. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Combining everything that had happened before, including Lu Fian's explanation to her, she could already guess the current situation. Yun Jian's mother did not forget to push her away when she pushed Lu Fian away. Yun Jian's eyes lit up, not expecting her mother to defend her as well. In spite of it, Lu Fian's behavior was inherited from her parents. "Mom!" Lu Fian called out. At the same time, Yun Jian had extended her arm. Just as Lu Fian's mother was about to push her and Lu Fian away, she flipped her hand and a pair of fair and clean hands coiled around Lu Fian's mother's wrist like a snake's body, pulling Lu Fian's mother to her side. At the same time, Yun Jian turned and stood where her mother was just now. Her position was the closest to Zhang Qin's grandfather who was coming at them with a hoe. "Both of you, leave." Yun Jian pressed her lips together but her expression remained unchanged. "No, Xiao Jian, you, child, leave quickly. This has nothing to do with you. You shouldn't be dragged into this." The former was Lu Fian's panicked voice while the latter was her mother's. In their panic, both of them had completely forgotten that Yun Jian had revealed her identity as an advanced special forces soldier. Lu Fian had also forgotten about Yun Jian's unusual skills when she was still in Xinjiang town. Right now, Lu Fian and her mother's biggest worry was that they would drag the innocent Yun Jian into the mess. In spite of it, it was because of Lu Fian and her mother's kindness that Yun Jian was willing to befriend them or help them with their problems. "Shoo!" Yun Jian suddenly put her hand to her lips and glanced at Lu Fian and her mother before pressing her lips together, a sharp glint flashing in her eyes. Lu Fian and her mother were stunned by Yun Jian's action. However, while he was stunned, Zhang Qin's grandfather had already led a group of people over with hoes in their hands. Crowds had started to gather around them. Some passers-by could not help stopping to watch the situation from afar. Some were panicking while others covered their mouths, unable to believe that they were witnessing someone hacking someone with a hoe. Everyone was afraid of what would happen next. Yun Jian, who stood at the front, would be hacked through by the hoe. In spite of it, no one left due to the anticipation of watching a show. Some of them had already covered their eyes, not daring to watch the situation. As Zhang Qin's grandfather cursed, he was overwhelmed by his impulsiveness and was about to chop Yun Jian with his hoe. Lu Fian and her mother wanted to rush over to block the attack on her mother's behalf to help her. Yun Jian's to her, in the next second, she was on the move to move. If someone asked how fast the speed was, then they would tell you without hesitation that it was now. Raising her leg 180 degrees, she kicked the hoe in Zhang Qin's grandfather's hand that was at the front of the pack, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, Yun Jian used the same speed to weave between Zhang Qin's grandfather's helpers. Her speed was so fast that no one could keep their eyes on her. By the time Yun Jian passed through Zhang Qin's grandfather's helpers, they were all lying on the ground and the hoe in their hands was nowhere to be seen. This scene set off a huge wave in everyone's eyes. Chapter 4:11. Yun Jian did look a little young, especially with her frail frame. Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men were different. Although they looked a little older, the way they rushed over with their hoes was even more ferocious. They did not look like old men at all. However, the reality was the complete opposite. In the end, it was Yun Jian, this seemingly weak little girl, who kicked the hose of Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men far away. Wherever Yun Jian went, Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men fell. Although there were no fatal injuries, she still managed to subdue them. At least, the scene of blood splattering on the spot did not happen. However, after Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men fell to the ground, they still felt the pain of being scraped. Lu Fian and her mother were dumbfounded. Even Lu Fian, who had seen Yun Jian's abilities, could not help but sigh. Yun Jian's abilities seemed to be even more shocking than before. Lu Fian's mother, on the other hand, was stunned. In her impression, Yun Jian had always been a gentle and weak little girl. When Yun Jian showed her ASF certificate at the police station, it was enough to shock her mother. Now, Lu Fian's mother was completely convinced. With such abilities, how did Yun Jian not look like an ASF soldier? The police are here. The police are here. Just then, someone in the crowd shouted. At that moment, Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men who were lying on the ground did not stand up again. Zhang Qin's grandfather kept cursing, but he could not stand up. Yun Jian pressed an acupoint on their cartilage. This acupoint was taught to her by the old man who had taught her hypnotism in her previous life. As long as she used her wrist strength to press on an acupoint, the person would only be able to move after at least 10 minutes. Of course, this method was only temporary. Upon hearing that the police had arrived, some of the people who had taken up positions around the area hurriedly made way for several male police officers in police uniforms who were rushing to the scene. Xinjiang town was not big, but it was not small either. It was not surprising that the police would immediately rush over when something happened. What's more, the matter had already blown up. There were more and more people gathering around, and there would be a few of them who would run to the nearby police station to complain. What happened? What happened? What's going on? He asked 3 questions in a row. A tall and thin policeman with a round face walked over with a few other policemen behind him. Coincidentally, when they arrived, they saw Yun Jian and Zhang Qin's grandfather lying on the ground. What are you doing? What are you doing? Little girls don't learn to be good and learn to cause trouble? Once the tall officer saw it, he led a few other officers to Yun Jian's side, talking as he walked. It was obvious that this tall policeman was the superior of these policemen. His position was slightly higher than theirs. Just as the tall policeman led the policeman towards Yun Jian, a male policeman beside the tall policeman saw Yun Jian's face clearly. The male policeman suddenly trembled. He tugged at the tall policeman and pointed at Yun Jian, shouting, She, what about her? The tall policeman asked in confusion. Chapter 4:12. This male officer was the one Yun Jian had met at the police station not too long ago. After Lu Fian and her mother had left the police station after visiting her father, the male officer could not help bragging to his colleagues in the station that he had seen an advanced special forces member. He had even exaggeratedly gestured with his finger. He had said that the advanced special forces member was a young girl who looked less than 18 years old. At that time, the tall policeman even ridiculed the male policeman with a contemptuous sentence. An underage member of the advanced special forces? Pfft, do you think it's so easy to join the advanced special forces? Even if they're new, they're only candidates for the special forces after entering the training camp. Not everyone has the chance to become an advanced special forces member. After the tall officer had said that, he had even added proudly, "My cousin is a special forces member. He's been in the special forces for more than 10 years, but he can't even cross the threshold of becoming an advanced special forces member." The tall officer had only said that to show off that he had a wider range of knowledge. At the same time, he wanted to express something. An underage member of the advanced special forces? He had to be kidding. The tall officer had even bragged to the other officers later on. Until someone had suddenly run to the police station to say that something had happened somewhere. That was why they had come here in such an aggressive manner. At first, the tall officer had really thought that the male officer was bluffing. It was only until he saw Yun Jian standing in front of Zhang Qin's grandfather and others who were beaten to the ground and exuded her natural regal aura that the tall officer sucked in a deep breath, thinking that what the male officer said just now was not impossible. As for what the male officer had said earlier, it had indeed shocked everyone present. Even though they did not know what the advanced special forces represented, everyone present had heard what the male officer had said earlier. However, everyone had clearly heard what the policeman had just said. The girl in front of them who had beaten up Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others was a special forces soldier. No wonder she was so powerful. With that thought, everyone was relieved and looked at Yun Jian as if they were looking at a powerhouse. Regardless of Yun Jian's identity, Yun Jian's ability had been displayed in front of them. This was an undeniable fact. Cough, cough, cough. Everyone, get up. Those who are causing trouble, follow me back to the police station. The tall policeman was not stupid. He saw that Yun Jian was indeed not simple, so he did not deliberately put on airs. Instead, he walked over and patted Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others who were lying on the ground with his baton. "Sheriff, we can't get up. I don't know what that wretched girl did to us just now, but now we can't even move." Zhang Qin's grandfather's helper saw that the police had come, so he said very respectfully, "Why can't you get up? Even if you can't get up, you still have to leave." The tall policeman wasn't polite to Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others. As he spoke, he turned around and instructed his men, "Each of you carry one of them and go back to the station to make a statement." Since the tall policeman who was one level higher than them had already spoken, the group of male policemen had no choice but to walk over and carry her. Yun Jian, Lu Fian, and Lu Fian's mother also went to the police station. After Yun Jian and the other two finished their statements, Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others could move. However, in the police station, Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others did not do anything else. Moreover, they had seen Yun Jian's skills. Just as Yun Jian and the other two walked out of the recording room, they saw a man in his 40s, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, rushing in from outside. The man ran to Zhang Qin's grandfather and frowned. "Dad, what's going on?" Chapter 4:13. Zhang Zhiming looked very depressed. His not-so-handsome face had sunk in. It was obvious that Zhang Qin's death had dealt a huge blow to Zhang Zhiming's family. Zhang Qin's grandfather pointed at Yun Jian and said a bunch of things to Zhang Zhiming. The three of them heard it clearly. What Zhang Qin's grandfather said was naturally a description of what had happened. However, Zhang Qin's grandfather exaggerated the details of how Yun Jian and the rest were beaten up. Zhang Zhiming frowned. After listening to Zhang Qin's grandfather, his frown was so deep that it could squash a fly. Just as Zhang Zhiming was about to walk over to Yun Jian, her mother suddenly let go of Lu Fian and Yun Jian's hands. She ran over to Zhang Zhiming and knelt down with a thud. The tears on Zhang Zhiming's mother's cheeks had yet to dry. She did not have the time to wipe the tears off her face. Instead, she moved her knees 2 steps closer to Zhang Zhiming. "I beg of you. I beg of you. This is my husband's fault. Please be magnanimous and stop bullying my daughter. She's innocent. She didn't do anything. If you want to kill her, come at me. I beg of you." Lu Fian's mother begged. Lu Fian's mother wasn't afraid of death, but she couldn't let her daughter live a life of fear where she could be hacked to death anytime. People without power and status were always the weakest in society. Because they couldn't get to know people who were better off than them. Yun Jian and Lu Fian didn't expect Lu Fian's mother to kneel down in front of Zhang Zhiming. "Mom! Mom, don't do this! Mom!" Lu Fian shouted and rushed over. She squatted down and hugged Mother Lu, trying to pull her up. Lu Fian couldn't let her mother kneel down and beg for mercy. "Your daughter is innocent, but isn't my son innocent too?" Zhang Zhiming looked at Lu Fian's mother coldly and kicked her away. He then looked at her and said, "My son is only in primary school. He's still so young. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Mother Lu kept apologizing as tears filled her eyes. She was apologizing for her husband's mistake. "Can I get my son back if you're sorry?" "Huh? Why can your daughter live well in this world, but my son is still so young, and he has to go to the Yellow Springs alone?" Ah! Zhang Zhiming's emotions were also stirred up. He even carried a thick aura of hostility, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "That's why I'm going to kill you. I'll kill your entire family. Ha ha ha, I'll kill your entire family for my pitiful son." Zhang Zhiming's emotions had reached a peak. Just when the group of people was in a hubbub and attracted the police once again, a clear sound was heard as the police tried to pacify the crowd but to no avail. Slap! A crisp sound rang out, and then it fell. Yun Jian had unknowingly stood in front of Zhang Zhiming. Without saying a word, she ruthlessly slapped him. This slap thoroughly woke Zhang Zhiming up. It also shocked the group of police, and made Lu Fian and her mother fall silent. For a moment, the surroundings were silent. Everyone could only hear the sound of breathing. At this moment, Yun Jian looked up. Her pair of sharp eyes were like a sharp sword, staring at Zhang Zhiming. The young girl's voice was heard. Chapter 4:14. Yun Jian's words were like a baton to Zhang Zhiming. He looked at Yun Jian blankly, opening his mouth but no words came out. As long as it involved his son, Zhang Zhiming would become anxious. It's already happened. Do you think your son can come back to life just by using your little bit of power to stir up trouble? Yun Jian's words pierced right through Zhang Zhiming's heart. However, she didn't stop there. Instead, she continued to speak in a tone that made people shudder. "You're dreaming. How dare you say that? You!" Zhang Qin's grandfather was enraged. He turned to look for his precious hoe to kill Yun Jian but was stopped by Zhang Zhiming. Zhang Zhiming looked at Yun Jian and seemed to have calmed down a little. He frowned and looked at Yun Jian. "Continue. You're the one who stopped them from visiting." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and looked at Zhang Zhiming. She pointed at Lu Fian and her mother. Not only Lu Fian and her mother, but even the group of police officers present were stunned on the spot. "How did you know?" Zhang Zhiming was even more shocked. He exclaimed, not afraid that his actions would be exposed. The policemen were shocked. Other than Zhang Jiming and the people in the police station, no one else knew about this. How did this young lady know? Zhang Jiming quickly came back to his senses. He sneered and looked at Yun Jian, then at Lu Fian and her mother. So what if you know? Huh, do you think you're the chief of the police station? Do you think you can stop me from doing this? Zhang Jiming's voice was filled with anger as he spoke arrogantly. Zhang Jiming did not know that Lu Fian and her mother had already gone in to visit her father. Moreover, he did not know Yun Jian's identity as an advanced special forces soldier. That was why he was so arrogant. B*****. How can our chief compare to her? The tall policeman had already believed that Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier. When he heard Zhang Jiming's words, he quickly stood up and scolded him. In fact, the tall policeman was afraid that Yun Jian would spread the news of him being bribed to Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian was a famous person in Z country. If the higher-ups investigated thoroughly, not to mention the money that Zhang Jiming had bribed them with, even all the policemen present would face the danger of losing their jobs. They couldn't afford to take this gamble. However, when Zhang Jiming heard the tall policeman's words, he felt that Yun Jian was inferior to the police chief. Oh, did you hear that? You can't even compare to the police chief. Zhang Jiming thought that the tall policeman was helping him to criticize Yun Jian. That was not all. Standing in the police station, in front of everyone, Zhang Jiming directly pointed his finger at Yun Jian. He raised his head high and continued, "My son was killed by you, so you have to pay with your lives. Do you know that power is greater than the sky? Even if I kill all of you today, you won't be able to find any excuses." These few words seemed to have dragged everyone in the police station down with them. It did not matter if it was anyone else, but Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier. And one of Gu Yunjian's. Chapter 4:15. Zhang Jiming, who was slapped hard by the tall officer, was stunned. What did he mean by she was an advanced special forces soldier? What did he mean by their station chief's status could not be compared to hers? After the tall officer slapped Zhang Jiming with a grim face, he suddenly broke into a grin and walked to Yun Jian. He was spouting nonsense just now. Don't take it to heart. We, the police, will investigate this matter thoroughly and deal with it fairly and justly. Don't worry. The tall officer's words shocked everyone present. Especially Zhang Jiming. Zhang Jiming dared to say that because he had bribed most of the officers in Xinjiang town's police station. Zhang Jiming did not expect everything to change once Yun Jian appeared. Lu Fian and her mother were dumbfounded when they heard the tall officer's words. Listening to the tall policeman's words, it seemed that the police station was going to reopen the case. After all, the root cause of the incident was the school's principal who wanted to invite Lu Fian's father to the school for help. According to the law, the principal had to bear the corresponding legal responsibility as well. As for Teacher Su, who knocked into Lu Fian's father and caused the bamboo pole to fall from the third floor, he was also the main person responsible for the incident. As long as the police station was willing to investigate the matter thoroughly, it meant that Lu Fian's father's sentence could be reduced. This news was probably the best outcome that Lu Fian and her mother could imagine for something like this to happen. After all, it was a fact that Lu Fian's father had accidentally killed someone. What? What about what you promised me? Zhang Jiming was dumbfounded. How much did he bribe the police station? The reason he gave the money back then was only to save his son from dying in vain. In the end, Yun Jian popped out of nowhere and ruined everything. Promise? What did we promise you? I'm warning you, if you or your father dare lay a hand on the mother and daughter again, the police station will arrest you. Even if the tall officer wanted to flatter Yun Jian, he was going to go all the way. You. Zhang Jiming glared at them and glared at Yun Jian, leaving Yun Jian with a message, "I'll remember you. Humph, don't let me see you in Longmen City next time or I'll make you suffer." He was the boss of a small business. He was still in the midst of negotiations and was so close to collaborating with new crews. To Zhang Zhiming, Yun Jian was a child from a poor family. Zhang Zhiming dared not make a fuss in the police station, so he left with his grandfather and the rest of them. In spite of that, Zhang Zhiming thought Yun Jian's eyes. Of course, she did not care about that at all. When Yun Jian revealed her identity as an advanced special forces soldier, she wanted the police to seek justice for Father Lu. It was already noon when she came out of the police station again. Yun Jian finally entered the Lu family's house. In order to thank her, Mother Lu cooked a table full of dishes. It was only then that Yun Jian took out 10,000 yuan from her backpack and the envelope Qin Yiru gave her and passed it to her mother. Yun Jian's mother refused to accept it at first, saying that she was already grateful for Yun Jian's help. How could she accept Yun Jian's money? Moreover, it was 12,000 yuan. It was a sum of money even in modern times, what more in the 98s. However, the Lu family was definitely short of money after what had happened. In the end, Yun Jian said that the money was a loan to them and that Lu Fian could work for her when she grew up. Chapter 4:16. Yun Jian stayed in Xinjiang town for the entire morning and afternoon, returning to Longmen City after having lunch at Lu Fian's house. The police had decided to investigate Lu Fian's father's case, so it would not be as unfair as before. Before she left, she told Lu Fian and her mother to look for her in Longmen City if the police did not reinvestigate the matter as they had said or if Zhang Qin's grandfather acted like he did in the past. Yun Jian even gave them her current address. Lu Fian bade farewell to Yun Jian with tears in her eyes, reluctance and gratitude evident in her eyes. You don't have to send me off. I'll visit your house during the Lunar New Year, Yun Jian said with a smile, patting the back of Lu Fian's hand. Lu Fian nodded. Lu Fian and her mother did not ask Yun Jian how she became an advanced special forces soldier. It was not that they did not care, but they knew how to respect Yun Jian's own thoughts. There were things that Yun Jian would say if she wanted to. It was already evening when they returned to Longmen City. Qin Yiru asked about the Lu family's recent situation in a concerned tone after she came back from work and Yun Jian told her everything. There were only Qin Yiru, Yun Jian, and Xiao Yunzhu at home during dinner. Yuni was out with her classmates, so she was not at home. She had been busy and was rarely at home. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. Qin Yiru stood up to open the door but was stopped by Yun Jian. Mom, continue eating. I'll go open the door. Yun Jian stood up and shoved her hands into her pockets to go to the door. Since no one opened the door, the doorbell seemed to ring more urgently. The person outside the door seemed to be looking for something urgent. Yun Jian was already walking to the door. With a creak, Yun Jian stood at the door and opened it. Outside the door, a figure was anxiously pacing back and forth. Once the girl saw Yun Jian, she rushed to her and said hastily, "Sister Jian. Not good. Boss was shot, and his life is in danger." This person was none other than Su Zetian's subordinate, Duan Lei. Duan Lei was a steady person, but at this moment, he lost his sense of heaviness. Yun Jian immediately knew that something must have happened to the Su Zetian that Duan Lei had mentioned. Although Yun Jian had taken over Dragon Head Gang and changed it to Falcon Hall, the gang members were used to calling her Sister Jian while Su Zetian was still addressed as boss. Yun Jian never cared about these things. "Let's talk outside." Duan Lei's voice was very loud. Yun Jian was afraid that Qin Yiru, who was in the room, would hear him, so she turned around. In spite of it, Qin Yiru had already heard the commotion. She stood up and walked over, asking, "Xiao Jian, what's going on? Who's in danger?" Yun Jian had Duan Lei leave the house first before she turned to lie to Qin Yiru. "Mom, it's something in the military. I'll go take a look and see if I can help. Don't worry." After that, Yun Jian hurried out of the house after Qin Yiru agreed. Qin Yiru did not ask further when she heard that it was something in the military. After Yun Jian left the house, she went to Falcon Hall's headquarters side by side with Duan Lei. What exactly happened? Yun Jian went straight to the point. As they walked, Duan Lei explained, but his slightly panting voice sounded very anxious. Boss was having a meeting with the higher-ups in the gang when a sniper sniped him from afar. It was so close. Boss would have died on the spot. Chapter 4:17. Yun Jian knew that Duan Lei and the gang were Su Zetian's buddies. Back then, it was Su Zetian who had led them to establish Dragon Head Gang. Of course, their friendship was greater than the sky. Do you know who did it? Yun Jian pressed her lips together. She did not look flustered, merely walking briskly to Falcon Hall's headquarters with Duan Lei. I have my suspicions but I'm not sure, Duan Lei said, calming down. Duan Lei had run over earlier but once he reached Yun Jian, he suppressed his fear. It was as if as long as Yun Jian was around, everything was not a problem and could be solved. Who is it? Yun Jian asked. Flying Passage, Duan Lei uttered those 3 words. Yun Jian nodded slightly, a sharp glint flashing in her expressionless eyes. If she remembered correctly, Flying Passage was a gang in Taizhou City, the closest to Longmen City. Furthermore, the Sky Bridge Gang and Falcon Hall had been having a territorial dispute in recent days. There were many cities near Longmen City. Su Linbua, whom they met at the National Mafia Tea Party, was the mafia boss of Yuzhou City, which was near Longmen City. As for the recent dispute between Flying Passage and Falcon Hall, it originated from Flying Passage. For some reason, Flying Passage insisted that a downtown area in Longmen City was actually under Flying Passage's jurisdiction. Naturally, Falcon Hall would not give up their territory, which was clearly theirs. Hence, a conflict had arisen between them recently. Su Zetian had been shot by a sniper when he was having a meeting with the higher-ups today to discuss how to deal with Flying Passage. He was still in the emergency room, unconscious. Therefore, Duan Lei guessed that it was Flying Passage who did it. With that in mind, Yun Jian and Duan Lei came to Falcon Hall's headquarters. According to Duan Lei, they had hired a professional doctor to remove the bullet for Su Zetian. However, removing the bullet in Falcon Hall's headquarters was not as well equipped as a hospital, so the risk factor was much higher. There was a reason why Su Zetian had not gone to the hospital yet. Usually, gangsters would not go to the hospital for no reason. Especially someone like Su Zetian, who had been shot, couldn't go to the hospital. Because how could an ordinary person get shot? Moreover, Z country prohibited ordinary people from carrying firearms. Once discovered, they would be severely punished. If he sent Su Zetian to the hospital, he would probably be arrested soon. If a regular gangster was caught, he could still find someone to bail him out. Even the police station could turn a blind eye to it. But if they were discovered in the hospital, it would be troublesome. Therefore, when gangsters got shot, they would rather die than go to the hospital for the sake of their brothers in the gang. As they spoke, Yun Jian and Duan Lei arrived at Falcon Hall's headquarters. A row of higher-ups stood in the main hall of Falcon Hall's headquarters. At this moment, all of them had ashen faces, anxious. Sister Jian's here. At this moment, someone saw Yun Jian and Duan Lei walking in from outside the door. He seemed to have found support in an instant and shouted. Yun Jian stepped in and glanced around before pressing her lips together and looking down at the crowd. Where's Su Zetian? Sister Jian, he's in the room. The doctor is still removing the bullet. The room can't be too stuffy in case boss's wound gets infected, so we can only stand outside and wait, one of the higher-ups told Yun Jian hoarsely with swollen eyes. Chapter 4:18. Su Zetian was in the room now and the doctor was operating on him. When the doctor first saw Su Zetian's injury, he shook his head and sighed, "I'll do my best." It was because of this that the higher-ups present were teary-eyed. Waiting was the longest. It was especially so when they did not know if Su Zetian could be saved. After all, he had fainted the moment he was shot. If the doctor had not come in time, Su Zetian would not have made it in his condition. Yun Jian shifted her gaze to the closed door of the room where Su Zetian was operating and strode toward it. Seeing that Yun Jian was about to open the door, the higher-up who said that Su Zetian was in the room stopped her quickly. "Sister Jian, you can't go in. The doctor said that the air inside must be kept clean or it'll infect boss's wound." The higher-up spoke up out of concern for Su Zetian's injury. Yun Jian understood. Before Yun Jian could say anything, Duan Lei's voice came from behind. "Sister Jian, we all know that you care about boss too, but all we can do now is wait. All of us hope that boss is safe and sound." As Duan Lei spoke, his voice grew hoarser. In the end, one could hear a hint of sobbing in his voice. Su Zetian's subordinates were loyal and devoted. Su Zetian himself didn't treat them as subordinates, but as his own brothers. Today, something like this happened to Su Zetian. This group of fearless men, who had relied on brute force to develop the Dragon Head Gang to its current state, had their eyes red. They all lowered their heads, and no one spoke for a moment. Just as everyone was crestfallen and trembling in fear that bad news would come out of the room at any time, a melodious and light female voice rang out. "I know medicine." When they first heard the voice, their hearts skipped a beat. In less than 3 seconds, they looked up abruptly, their bright eyes looking straight at the girl standing at the front. Sister Jian knew medicine? They were stupefied. Yun Jian watched their reaction with a smile and flipped her hair before looking at the group with pressed lips. "What? You don't believe me?" Yun Jian's voice sounded like a warning bell in everyone's hearts. Everyone's eyes turned to Yun Jian, color returning to their eyes in the blink of an eye. Duan Lei stood up immediately and nodded confidently, looking at Yun Jian. "Sister Jian, we believe everything you say." Ever since Yun Jian's performance at the Mafia Tea Party had spread in the gang, everyone believed in one thing. Yun Jian was never one to speak empty words. Everything she said was reasonable. Looking at the sudden change in everyone's expression and the trust in their eyes, Yun Jian could not help feeling a jolt. She did not know when they had started trusting her. "Duan Lei, go in with me. Everyone else, wait outside," Yun Jian told the rest after a glance at Duan Lei. With that, she pushed the door open and entered the room without hesitation. Duan Lei did not know why Yun Jian asked him to go in, but he followed her anyway. He closed the door after entering the room. Chapter 419. Inside the room. After Yun Jian and Duan Lei entered the room, they saw a long, flat table covered with white gauze. An unconscious person was lying on top of it. It was Su Zetian. The long table was obviously used as a temporary operating table. At that moment, countless surgical tools were placed beside the long table. A middle-aged man in a white coat was standing at the side, preparing for the operation. The operation had yet to begin. The middle-aged man in the white coat was called Su Zifan. Su Zifan was a doctor from a private hospital. His medical skills were quite good, and he would visit people to treat them. The former Dragon Head Gang, which was now Falcon Hall, would call Su Zifan whenever someone was injured. Therefore, Su Zifan could be considered half a private doctor of Falcon Hall. Seeing Yun Jian and Duan Lei coming in from outside, Su Zifan frowned. His hand, which was disinfecting the surgical tools, paused for a moment. "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to wait outside? No one is allowed to stand in the room. Otherwise, if the wound gets infected and something happens, I won't be responsible." Su Zifan frowned. He paused and said. Su Zifan had chased the group of high-ranking personnel out of the room to wait because of his words. Su Zifan did not know Yun Jian. Naturally, he did not know that she was the current boss of Falcon Hall. "Get out of the way. I'll be the chief surgeon." Yun Jian explained her purpose in a simple and clear manner. She did not say anything else. "You?" Su Zifan was taken aback. It was only then that he took a second look at Yun Jian and was even more surprised. How old was this little girl? And she was the chief surgeon? Did she think that the operation was a joke? "You're the chief surgeon. Have you studied medicine? Are you still in high school?" "Little girl." Su Zifan felt that he was the only doctor present, so his tone was rather arrogant. Moreover, Su Zifan's medical skills were indeed good. Many hospitals had offered him high salaries to work in their hospitals, but he had rejected them all. In addition, as long as it was a patient, they would naturally need his help. Su Zifan had never met any opponents, so he usually carried a sense of arrogance in his bones. "Su Zifan, take a good look at who is standing in front of you. Be careful that I don't kill you for speaking rudely." Duan Lei glared at Su Zifan and spoke viciously. Before this, Su Zifan was the only doctor here, so Duan Lei would go easy on him. It was different now. Sister Jian knew medicine as well. Su Zifan was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Duan Lei to speak to him in such a tone. "After you, Sister Jian." Duan Lei saw that Su Zifan had restrained himself and did not waste any more time. He turned to look at Yun Jian and said. Yun Jian walked over. "Sister Jian?" Could the person whom Duan Lei, a high-ranking member of Falcon Hall, address as Sis be the young new boss of Falcon Hall that was rumored to be? Su Zifan was dumbfounded for a moment. Only then did he realize how much hatred his words had caused. His whole body shivered as he stood there. Su Zifan didn't even dare to move. She was the boss of Falcon Hall. It meant that it was not impossible for Yun Jian to kill Su Zifan on the spot in a fit of rage. While Su Zifan was still in a daze, Yun Jian had already come to the long table and put on the surgical gown and sterile gloves that Su Zifan had brought for her. "You'll be my assistant." Yun Jian suddenly turned to look at Su Zifan. She did not blame him for his rudeness, nor did she say anything else. Not expecting Yun Jian to say that, Su Zifan was stunned again before he nodded. "Oh." Chapter 420. While Su Zifan was still in a daze, Yun Jian had already walked to Su Zetian's side. Su Zifan's medical skills were indeed brilliant. The local disinfection of the area where Su Zetian was shot had already been arranged properly. Su Zetian was shot in the back, and the muzzle was near his heart. Fortunately, when the bullet entered his heart, his beating heart had just contracted, so the bullet did not directly penetrate his heart. At least for now, Su Zetian still had a chance to live. If Su Zetian died on the spot, then even Yun Jian would not be able to save him. Scalpel. Yun Jian extended her hand to where Su Zifan was. Su Zifan was dumbfounded. "Scalpel." Yun Jian repeated patiently. In fact, if Su Zifan was not the only one present who knew medicine, Yun Jian would not have asked him to be her assistant. After all, this was a surgery near the heart. If she was not careful, Su Zetian would die on the spot. It was very risky to complete the surgery by herself, so in this case, Yun Jian had to choose Su Zifan as her temporary assistant. Su Zifan was still in a daze, but when Yun Jian called him, he handed over the scalpel. In fact, Su Zifan was still somewhat against Yun Jian performing the surgery. He always believed in his own judgment. This little girl, could she really be the chief surgeon? As for why Su Zifan did not stop her, it was because he had already determined that Yun Jian was the boss of Falcon Hall. What a joke! How could he stop the boss of Falcon Hall from doing what she wanted to do? Unless he did not want his life anymore. When Yun Jian took the scalpel and reached for Su Zetian's wound, Su Zifan almost cried out in surprise. Who would perform surgery like this? If Yun Jian's scalpel cut the artery, Su Zetian would definitely die on the spot. In the end, Su Zifan could not help but shout out due to his doctor's ethics, "No, if you cut the artery directly, it will lead to massive bleeding and death." Su Zifan widened his eyes at the same time. He saw Yun Jian's outstretched hand as if she was going to cut Su Zetian's pulse in the back. He was so scared that he screamed to stop her. "Shut up." The girl did not turn around. Her mouth was covered by a mask, so her light and dignified voice came out from under the mask. Su Zifan shuddered. At this moment, Yun Jian had already used the scalpel to cut the artery. Hemostatic forceps. Yun Jian put down the scalpel and reached out her hand without turning her head. Su Zifan trembled as he placed the forceps in Yun Jian's hand. With nimble hands, Yun Jian stopped the blood from flowing out of Su Zetian's artery as quickly as she could. The following surgery, the surgery, was not so difficult. However, Su's breathing gradually, blood zess Yun Jian's surgical method was different from that of a regular chief surgeon. Every time she made a cut, it was a Achilles heel, but she was always able to stitch it up in time. Su was. Su Zifan, on the other hand, was stupefied. His mouth was wide open, forming an O shape. He felt like he had seen Yun Jian's operation before. The surgery's done. He's fine now. They can come in for a visit but don't get too close. Yun Jian turned to tell Duan Lei, who was equally dumbfounded as she pulled her mask halfway down. Amen. Duan Lei recovered from his shock after a long time and turned to open the door. Soon, the higher-ups outside came in. "Boss is fine." "That's great. Sister Jian is amazing." The group of people exclaimed as if they had breathed a sigh of relief. "Die. Hand of the Grim Reaper." At this moment, a gentle and weak voice was heard. The one who spoke was Su Zifan, who was so dumb that he had lost his intuition. "What?" someone asked in surprise when the group noticed Su Zifan, who was standing not far away from Su Zetian. Chapter 421. Yun Jian was taken aback when she heard from others that she was given this title by people in the medical field when she was practicing medicine in her past life. Grim Reaper's Hand was the title she received when she disguised herself as a mature woman during a mission and approached an assassination mission. She was renowned in the medical field. She did not expect that someone in Country Z would recognize her disguise in her past life. Of course, Su Zifan did not recognize Yun Jian based on her appearance but Yun Jian's technique. When he was studying medicine in Country M, he was fortunate enough to watch the video recording of the woman known as Grim Reaper's Hand surgery from his master. It was a miracle in the medical field. Su Zifan's words stunned everyone present, especially Duan Lei, who had witnessed Yun Jian's surgery. He was so emotional that he could not express it with words. Everyone was looking at Yun Jian with probing gazes, as if waiting for Yun Jian's reply. Yun Jian suddenly waved her hand and pressed her lips into a smile. "It's purely a coincidence." The higher-ups did not doubt Yun Jian's words. Su Zifan, on the other hand, was frowning hard as he looked at Yun Jian, unable to calm himself down. Others might not know, but he had witnessed the surgery of the woman known as Grim Reaper's Hand with his own eyes. If Yun Jian and the woman's surgical technique were to be 100% identical, then they were 90% similar. Other than their looks, Yun Jian and the woman were practically carved from the same mold. "I'll leave Su Zetian's post-surgery care to you," Yun Jian said after a brief moment of squinting at Su Zifan. "Ah, me?" Su Zifan was taken aback. Yun Jian did not give Su Zifan a chance to reject as she turned to leave with a press of her lips. "Sister Jian, where are you going?" Duan Lei and the others could not help asking Yun Jian when they saw her leaving. "Flying Passage dared to send a sniper to hurt my man. Of course, I should give them a big gift in return." As Yun Jian spoke, a sharp, murderous glint flashed in her eyes. As expected, Sister Jian would not abandon Falcon Hall and leave them alone. Everyone was seething with resentment. Yun Jian's words made them lift their heads proudly. Yun Jian's action was telling them that everyone in Falcon Hall was a part of the organization. Those who bullied Falcon Hall were the ones who hurt her. Yun Jian was not going to let the matter rest. Sister Jian, I'll go with you. Knowing that Su Zetian was out of danger, Duan Lei did not look after him and went to Yun Jian. At the same time, his eyes were red with anger. His eyes were no longer filled with tears, but instead, they were filled with anger and the fury of revenge. Sister Jian, we're going too. Me too. How dare Flying Passage lay a finger on our boss? We're going to bathe them in blood. Loud voices resounded throughout the place. Everyone had only one thought in mind, and that was to make Flying Passage pay the price. They were 100% sure that Su Zetian's injury was Flying Passage's doing. No one is allowed to go. Yun Jian looked at the group and spoke with a press of her lips. Then, she continued, but what she said was hot-blooded. It's just Flying Passage. I alone am enough to take it down. Yun Jian's brash and arrogant words sounded domineering to the ears of the others. No one thought that she was young and frivolous. Chapter 422. On the highway from Longmen City to Taizhou City, a fiery red Ferrari LaFerrari sped along. The red Ferrari overtook countless cars, pulling the distance to the maximum. The camera turned around and passed by the corner of a mirror. A delicate and pretty little face was reflected in the mirror. Yun Jian sat in the driver's seat of the Ferrari LaFerrari. She turned the car around and sped along the highway where there were fewer cars. There was only one destination for her, Taizhou City, flyover. She was the only one involved in this operation. Since she said that she alone was enough, Yun Jian did not allow anyone from Falcon Hall to follow her to Taizhou City. In addition, Su Zetian still needed care. The success of the operation did not mean that Su Zetian was out of danger. After all, the injury was near his heart and he had to be nursed carefully if he wanted to recover. To prevent snipers who saw that Su Zetian was not dead and came back, Yun Jian sent Qingyu to patrol Falcon Hall more often. Qingyu might not be strong, but she had thousands of ways to kill her opponent when it came to assassination. Therefore, as long as Qingyu was guarding Falcon Hall, Su Zetian and his men would be fine. Taizhou City, flyover. A lavish and extravagant evening banquet was being held. The banquet was brightly lit all around. During this period of time, countless people came and went, expressing their goodwill one after another. It was a scene of harmony and joy. Somewhere in the banquet, a bald middle-aged man was holding a red wine glass in his right hand. He was chatting with a man of similar age who was only wearing a black unlined shirt and had a dragon tattoo near his collarbone. The bald middle-aged man was none other than the boss of Taizhou City's flyover. His name was Su Zhouzheng and people called him Third Master. Flyover was more powerful than the original Falcon Hall. In addition, Su Zhouzheng's flyover had always maintained its position as the second largest gang in the entire Zhe province. Therefore, his position was one of the best among all the gang bosses in Zhe province. The man with the dragon tattoo on his collarbone who Su Zhouzheng was talking to was the head of a firearms family, Yan Tianlei. Yan Tianlei's firearms family had no international reputation, but in Z country, he was a major firearms smuggler. Even Su Zhouzheng, who was the second largest gang in Zhe province, could not help but feel respect for Yan Tianlei. It could be said that this banquet was held by Su Zhouzheng to welcome Yan Tianlei. Brother Su, I heard that you've been in a territorial dispute with Longmen City over recently. I wonder if it's true. Yan Tianlei held his wine glass as he looked at Su Zhouzheng with a grin. His face that did not look handsome looked even more menacing. That's right. Su Zhouzheng nodded. As if he wanted to establish a good relationship with Yan Tianlei, he purposely leaned close to Yan Tianlei's ear and whispered, "Brother Yan, you and I are old friends. There are some things I won't hide from you. Longmen City's Falcon Hall has a new boss now. I didn't go to the National Mafia Tea Party last time, but I've heard some things. But I just don't believe in this. What use can a? Other than spreading her legs to give birth, what can she do? I'll be honest with you. I've hired a sniper. If there's no accident, the current boss of Falcon Hall is probably dead by now." Just as Su Zhouzheng finished his tirade, the tightly shut door of the banquet was kicked open from the outside. A young girl with a delicate and beautiful face wearing a long black down jacket walked in, attracting the attention of many people. Su Zhouzheng and Yan Tianlei were shocked as well. Chapter 423. Yun Jian's appearance and her domineering and arrogant words attracted everyone's attention. Including Su Zhouzheng, who was called out, and Yan Tianlei, who was standing in front of Su Zhouzheng and chatting with him. Everyone turned their attention to Yun Jian, who had just kicked the door open. Yun Jian's delicate face was delicately sculpted. She was dressed in a plain, long, black down jacket that wrapped around her impressive figure. It was not hard to imagine what kind of figure lay beneath the thick jacket. In spite of it, the most shocking thing was what Yun Jian said. Everyone knew that this banquet was hosted by the boss of Flying Bridge, Su Zhouzheng, and that the host was Yan Tianlei, who came from an armaments family. And this young girl who had appeared out of nowhere dared to provoke the boss of Flying Bridge in front of everyone. Didn't her mother teach her that doing so would bring about a fatal disaster? Everyone was guessing Yun Jian's identity, but judging from Yun Jian's youthful appearance, everyone could only guess that she was a student in school. Other than that, there was nothing else. In spite of it, what Yun Jian said just now had truly stunned them. Su Zhouzheng frowned maliciously. He reached out and ran his hand through his bald head, his lips curling into a sinister smile. "Little girl, you're looking for me." Su Zhouzheng was standing at a corner of the banquet. He was currently looking at Yun Jian from the corner of his eyes. When he saw Yun Jian's face, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Everyone in the circle knew that Su Zhouzheng's tone had a hint of mockery in it. It was a sign that he was about to lose his temper. Hence, when the people around saw it, they were so scared that they hid a distance away. What a joke. Su Zhouzheng was the boss of Taizhou City's black market. Who would dare offend him? However, just as the crowd was about to sit back and enjoy the show, thinking that Yun Jian would be done for daring to behave so atrociously in front of Su Zhouzheng, the young girl's clear voice rang out again. "You're the one I'm looking for. How dare Flying Bridge send a sniper to hurt Falcon Hall's men? I'm going to destroy Flying Bridge today." What frivolous words. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. In an instant, they turned their heads to look at Yun Jian. Everyone's eyes were filled with more thoughts. Could this girl be from Falcon Hall? It wasn't that the crowd didn't believe Yun Jian's words, but Yun Jian's age made it hard for them to believe. More importantly, if she claimed to be a member of Falcon Hall, why did she come alone? Thus, at that moment, everyone took Yun Jian's words to be a joke. What's more, she had shamelessly boasted that she was going to destroy Flying Passage. Just her alone? Puff! Are you kidding me? One had to know that the Sky Bridge gang was the second largest gang in Jia province. Even the largest gang in Jia province would not be able to destroy the Sky Bridge gang. Just by herself? To hell with it. F***ck, you little brat, scram back to where you came from. Falcon Hall? Who does Falcon Hall think it is? Little girl, don't try to act cool for no reason. Do it again and I'll shoot you. Just then, one of Su Zhouzheng's underlings swiftly whipped out a shiny pistol and pointed it at Yun Jian, threatening her. Seeing Su Zhouzheng's underlings whipping out a pistol, the crowd shuddered. After all, everyone was afraid of guns from the bottom of their hearts. However, Yun Jian, who who had a gun pointed at her head, did not bat an eyelid. She curled her lips slightly without anyone noticing, and a murderous glint flashed across her eyes. Isn't she Falcon Hall's new boss, slaying Luo? I saw her at the National Mafia tea party. Just then, someone in the crowd suddenly pointed at Yun Jian and shouted in a trembling voice. Chapter 424. The person who spoke was the boss of a small gang. He did not have much authority, and there were only a few hundred people in his gang. However, he was fortunate enough to attend the National Mafia tea party. When Yun Jian appeared just now, the person felt a sense of familiarity. Originally, a small gang like his wasn't qualified to participate in the National Mafia tea party, but he relied on his connections to force his way in. He had only caught a few glimpses of Yun Jian from afar. He had found Yun Jian familiar when she appeared. He thought for a while and suddenly recalled. Wasn't she the boss of Falcon Hall, slaying Luo? Her? Falcon Hall's new boss? She's the woman named Slaying Luo? Really? I heard that a mysterious man had annihilated the #1 gang in the northern region, the Green Tiger Gang, for Falcon Hall's boss, Slaying Luo. She's just a woman who relied on a man to get to where she is now. Not necessarily. She's not to be trifled with. Everyone present began to talk among themselves. Their words were filled with deep admiration for Yun Jian, but there were also some who snorted at her. No one had expected Falcon Hall's new boss, Slaying Luo, to be so young. Even Su Zhouzheng and Yen Tianlei could not help but take a deep breath. When the Flying Passage members heard that Yun Jian was Falcon Hall's boss, Slaying Luo, they all ran over to surround Yun Jian. Given the current hostility between Flying Passage and Falcon Hall, the Flying Passage members would not hold back now that Yun Jian's identity had been exposed. You're Falcon Hall's boss, Slaying Luo? Su Zhouzheng could not help but re-evaluate Yun Jian. He changed his tone and walked up to Yun Jian with a frown, but his attitude had changed drastically. However, due to the territorial dispute between Flying Passage and Falcon Hall, Su Zhouzheng was not in a good mood even if he did not look at Yun Jian with that mocking gaze. She was surrounded by her brothers from Flying Passage. One of Su Zhouzheng's men was even pointing a gun at her. However, she faced Su Zhouzheng fearlessly and did not panic at all. Congratulations, you guessed right. Yun Jian's eyelids didn't even twitch as she said this directly. After a pause, she added coldly, unfortunately, there's no prize for guessing correctly. Su Zhouzheng frowned. He suddenly looked at Yun Jian with disdain, as if he was looking at a dead person. He had been eyeing Falcon Hall's downtown area for a long time and had wanted to take it for himself, but Falcon Hall had refused to let go. Falcon Hall was ranked near the bottom among all the gangs in Jia province, and Flying Passage was the second largest gang in the province. Therefore, Su Zhouzheng flew into a rage out of humiliation when he failed to take over. He sent a sniper to kill Falcon Hall's boss, and in the end, annihilated Falcon Hall. However, Su Zhouzheng did not know that the sniper he sent had targeted the wrong person. Therefore, Su Zetian took a bullet for Yun Jian for nothing. Since you're here, don't think of leaving. Su Zhouzheng suddenly smiled sinisterly. He clapped his hands and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Su Zhouzheng had never believed in rumors. Especially after seeing Yun Jian in person, Su Zhouzheng believed that she was just a woman who spread her legs and relied on men to get to where she was now. After Su Zhouzheng clapped his hands, another group of people rushed out from the back of the banquet and surrounded Yun Jian in layers. When the crowd saw this, they did not even dare to make a sound. However, everyone only had one thought in mind: this woman named Luo Sha dared to challenge Flying Passage alone. She was done for. Chapter 425. Wipe out Flying Passage. You think you can do it alone? Su Zhouzheng laughed when he heard Yun Jian say she wanted to wipe out his gang for the second time. It was a mocking and contemptuous laugh. Clearly, Yun Jian had come alone and boasted that she wanted to wipe out Flying Passage. In the eyes of Su Zhouzheng and everyone else present, it was unrealistic. Even the biggest gang in Jia province could not do anything to Flying Passage. She was just a little brat. Not only had she come alone, she even wanted to wipe out Flying Passage. That was more unbelievable than dinosaurs coming back to life. I alone am enough to wipe out Flying Passage. Yun Jian laughed just as arrogantly. However, Su Zhouzheng was really pushed to the edge when he heard that. No one would be able to take it if someone continued to act so arrogantly in front of him. Moreover, Su Zhouzheng was the boss of Taizhou City's black market. Su Zhouzheng was truly enraged to be mocked by an underage girl in front of so many people. His sinister face contorted. His bald head coupled with his tightly furrowed brows made him look repulsive. Kill. Kill. Kill this bitch for me. Damn it. She has a death wish. How dare she behave so atrociously in my territory? Su Zhouzheng pointed at Yun Jian and shouted at his men who had formed a circle around Yun Jian. Yes, sir. Su Zhouzheng's men answered. Tisk, tsk, tsk. However, before Su Zhouzheng's men could do anything to Yun Jian, they heard a series of noises. Thump, thump. Following the noises, Su Zhouzheng's men felt a sharp pain in their knees. The next second, they were all kneeling on the ground. They had not attacked yet. A large number of them had already fallen. However, this group of Su Zhouzheng's subordinates who were kneeling on the ground all had one thing in common: their knees were pierced deeply by a very small blade, forcing everyone to kneel on the ground at the same time as if their legs were paralyzed or directly fell to the ground. When the blade pierced deep into their knees, excruciating pain spread throughout their bodies. Before Su Zhouzheng's subordinates could make a move, they had all fallen to the ground and were howling in pain. This scene scared the hell out of everyone. Everyone saw that the blades that had pierced into the knees of Su Zhouzheng's men had been shot out by Yun Jian. Ah! Boss, this blade is poisonous. We can't stand up. One of Su Zhouzheng's men who had fallen down shouted desperately. They only felt that their bodies were weak. After being stabbed by the blades, they didn't even have the strength to stand up. What was going on? Everyone was terrified. Then, they all turned to look at Yun Jian. However, Yun Jian pursed her lips slightly and revealed a contemptuous smile in front of everyone. She even knew how to poison him. Moreover, the way he threw the blade was exactly the same as the assassins in the movies. Everyone looked at Yun Jian in horror, as if they had seen the Grim Reaper. No wonder she was so confident. The blades in her hands were laced with poison. Once they pierced someone, that person would instantly go limp and would not even have the strength to stand up. Yun Jian smirked when she saw that Su Zhouzheng's men were already wailing and howling. These flying blades had been soaked in Qing Yu's poison. Once the blades grazed the body and came into contact with the blood in the body, the person would instantly go limp and would not even have the strength to stand up. This woman has a trick up her sleeve. Zhou Jia, shoot her. Quick. Kill her. Su Zhouzheng shouted in horror. He quickly ordered the gun-wielding subordinate beside him, clearly shocked by Yun Jian's actions. Before he could finish, Yun Jian's leisurely voice rang out again. It's time for the game to end. Since Flying Passage dares to target Falcon Hall, you'll have to pay the price. Chapter 426. As he spoke, Yun Jian's figure had already flashed. Su Zhouzheng's gun-wielding subordinate, Zhou Jia, listened to Su Zhouzheng's words and quickly grabbed the pistol and aimed at Yun Jian again. But in the blink of an eye, where was Yun Jian? Gone. I'm here. Suddenly, the girl's light voice came from behind. Zhou Jia's heart tightened. He grabbed the pistol in horror and turned around, but just as he turned around, he heard a "chi" sound, and a blade had already pierced his leg. His body went soft in an instant, and Zhou Jie fell straight to the ground like a puddle of mud. Yun Jian's speed just now was so fast that it could not be captured by the naked eye. Everyone present was horrified, especially Su Zhouzheng. He watched in horror as Yun Jian stabbed the blade into Zhou Jie's leg, and then Zhou Jie fell to the ground. The pistol in Zhou Jie's hand also slipped to the ground. "You!" Su Zhouzheng's mouth was wide open. His shock at this time could no longer be described with words. Su Zhouzheng's group of subordinates all fell to the ground at this time, and no one could still stand and look at Yun Jian. Even Yen Tianlei, who was born in a family of arms and was used to seeing the world, could not help but tremble at this time. This girl was not human at all. This kind of strength, this kind of skill. She was not like the woman in the rumors who relied on men to get to the top. What? Yun Jian continued to maintain her slightly restrained smile. She looked at Su Zhouzheng, and the corner of her mouth was filled with a smile that made everyone present feel creepy. With a "pa" sound, Yun Jian did not look at the ground. She stretched out her foot and stomped forward, stepping on the pistol that Zhou Jie had just slid to the ground. With a sudden stomp, Yun Jian's foot was slightly stronger, and the pistol was hooked by Yun Jian's foot and bounced up. This jump happened to be at the height of Yun Jian's hanging hand. She only needed to reach forward and grab the handle of the pistol. At this moment, Yun Jian's actions were more like a demon from hell. Her movements were extremely smooth, as if she had practiced it countless times. Su Zhouzheng couldn't help but tremble. He no longer dared to treat Yun Jian as an ordinary girl or a woman who relied on men to get to the top. He even began to regret treating Yun Jian as that kind of woman. At this moment, Yun Jian skillfully fiddled with the pistol. She fiddled with the pistol out of habit and pointed the muzzle at Su Zhouzheng. "How do you want to die?" Yun Jian narrowed her eyes with a smile. Her words carried a frightening evil intent. Su Zhouzheng, who witnessed Yun Jian snatching the gun and pointing the muzzle at him, trembled all over his body. He was so scared that his face turned pale. All of Su Zhouzheng's men were defeated by Yun Jian. Although he had some martial arts, judging from Yun Jian's skills just now, his little bit of martial arts was not enough at all. However, Su Zhouzheng was not a person who would wait for death. His face twisted and he quickly threatened, "You can't kill me. If you kill me, then my brother will definitely avenge me. Do you know who my brother is? He's a member of the Kosha mercenaries. If you kill me, you'll die." This was Su Zhouzheng's trump card, and Su Zhouzheng would only use this trump card when his life was threatened. However, after hearing Su Zhouzheng's words, Yun Jian's hand paused. She drew an arc. "Oh. Su Zhouzheng actually has a brother who works for the Kosha mercenaries." The Kosha mercenaries were popular all over the world, so Yun Jian was not surprised that she could meet members of the Kosha mercenaries wherever she went. Chapter 427. Everyone's eyelids twitched at Su Zhouzheng's words. Even Yen Tianlei could not help the twitch of his lips. Su Zhouzheng's brother was from the Kosha mercenaries. If Su Zhouzheng had not encountered a life-threatening situation, he would not have mentioned it and the others would not have known. Now that they knew, however, it was impossible for them to remain calm. The Kosha mercenaries. Those present were either in the underworld or related to the black market, so they were familiar with the Kosha mercenaries. Such a powerful organization of assassins and mercenaries was one of the top organizations in the world. Other than an Hun group, there was no one else who could compete with it. Su Zhouzheng's brother was from the Kosha mercenaries. This was enough to shock everyone. Just like how Su Zetian was a member of the Kosha mercenaries, anyone who belonged to the Kosha mercenaries would be protected by the Kosha mercenaries. Back when Su Zetian made a bet with the foreigners, he had invited the Kosha mercenaries to help him. Yun Jian had just been reborn then and Snake. Lizard had come to Longmen City using that as an excuse. Since Su Zhouzheng's brother was a member of the Kosha mercenaries, it meant that his brother could also seek help from the Kosha mercenaries. In other words, as long as he was a member of the Kosha mercenaries, he would have the support of the Kosha mercenaries, the mercenary organization that was renowned throughout the world. Looking at the people around him who panicked when they heard him say that his brother was a member of the Kosha mercenaries, Su Zhouzheng felt himself regaining his composure. When Su Zhouzheng turned to look at Yun Jian and saw that there was no fear or panic on her face, he was stupefied. "It's the Kosha mercenaries. Aren't you afraid?" Su Zhouzheng asked Yun Jian indignantly. He did not believe that Yun Jian was not even afraid of the Kosha mercenaries. "Scared?" Yun Jian raised her eyebrows. She seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She chuckled and then pursed her lips. "Your brother's code name?" Yun Jian's smile faded as her lips curled up, her eyes narrowed into slits as she asked with interest. Su Zhouzheng thought that Yun Jian did not know the might of the Kosha mercenaries. He even exaggerated, "His name is Leopard Head. In the Kosha mercenaries, he can be ranked in the top 1,000. As he spoke, Su Zhouzheng raised his head as if he was showing off something incredible to Yun Jian. His bald head could not help but look proud. Pfft, Yun Jian was really amused by Su Zhouzheng. She chuckled softly. Being ranked in the top 1,000 of the Kosha mercenaries meant that he could hold his own in Country Z. However, Su Zhouzheng's actions were like bragging about how powerful his brother Mouse was in front of Tiger. "I don't remember when being ranked in the top 1,000 of the Kosha mercenaries was considered a powerful person." Yun Jian stopped laughing. She stretched out her hand and gently brushed away the hair that was hanging down. Her lips curled up slightly as she spoke. "My Kosha mercenaries?" The group latched onto the 6 words that Yun Jian had uttered. To be able to use the words, "my Kosha mercenaries," other than the boss of the Kosha mercenaries, only the higher-ups of the Kosha mercenaries had such qualifications. She was also a member of the Kosha mercenaries. Furthermore, she was. Chapter 428. You're also a member of the Kosha mercenaries?" Su Zhouzheng shouted in despair. Su Zhouzheng's biggest trump card was his brother in the Kosha mercenaries. Whenever he was in trouble, his brother would always be there to protect him. In turn, Su Zhouzheng was indirectly protected by the Kosha mercenaries. Because of this, Su Zhouzheng's flying passage was already ranked as the 2nd largest gang in Jia province. "What do you think?" Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She twirled the gun in her hand and pointed it at Su Zhouzheng. "All right, enough with the nonsense. But I have to thank you. If you didn't tell me, I probably wouldn't have known that the Kosha mercenaries have a useless brother like your brother." Yun Jian closed one of her eyes. She laughed maniacally and narrowed her eyes at Su Zhouzheng. "No. Don't kill me. I was wrong, don't kill me." After realizing that Yun Jian was not afraid that his brother was a member of the Kosha mercenaries, Su Zhouzheng immediately realized that Yun Jian might really be a member of the Kosha mercenaries. She might even be a high-ranking member of the Kosha mercenaries. Su Zhouzheng was in a mess. He suddenly turned around and ran forward as if he was running for his life. Seeing Su Zhouzheng running away in a frenzy, the crowd felt that it was unrealistic. Su Zhouzheng was the boss of the flying passage in Taizhou City. In spite of it, he was forced into this state by Yun Jian. Yan Tianlei knew that anything could happen if he did not step up now, so he quickly said to Yun Jian, "You're right. Hello, young friend. I'm from the Yan family's firearms family. I wonder if you can give me some face and spare brother Su this time." Yan Tianlei's words made Yun Jian's hand that was about to pull the trigger pause. Yan Tianlei was delighted. He thought that he had convinced Yun Jian. Who knew that in the next second, there would be a loud bang. The gun in Yun Jian's hand emitted a wisp of green smoke, but she didn't have any extra expression on her face. Bang! A crisp sound came from afar. Su Zhouzheng, who was running away in a panic, was hit in the heart by a bullet and died on the spot. Yun Jian's marksmanship was extremely fast and accurate. There wasn't even the slightest bit of deviation. Everyone looked at Yun Jian in horror. They watched as she gently raised her hand and put away the pistol. She turned to Yen Tianlei, whose face instantly turned pale, and said loudly, "Give you face? Who are you? Why should I give you face?" Su Zhouzheng had to die. Su Zetian had almost lost his life, not to mention that Su Zetian had blocked the attack for himself. What Su Zhou wanted was his own life. Yun Jian had once said that she would kill anyone who wanted her life first. Su Zhouzheng's death meant that Flying Passage was no more. After all, a gang without a leader was the easiest to take over. Yen Tianlei's pale face was drained of blood. He wasn't the only one. Even those who had been in the underworld for years or had plenty of experience were completely stunned when they saw how decisive Yun Jian was in killing someone. She showed no signs of panic after killing someone, as if killing someone was just a simple meal. Was she really just a teenage girl? Yun Jian merely sneered at the terrified expressions of the people around her. She wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she said arrogantly, "I'm never careless when it comes to killing. If Flying Passage dares to mess with Falcon Hall, then they'll have to pay the price. Listen up, if anyone dares to lay a finger on Falcon Hall in the future, Flying Passage will be your escape route." Chapter 429. Anyone who dared lay a finger on Falcon Hall would suffer the same fate as Flying Passage. Flying Passage, destroyed. As if to prove that statement, Yun Jian led Falcon Hall's upper echelons into Flying Passage's headquarters the moment she returned. Due to the loss of their leader, internal strife broke out within Flying Passage. That was when Falcon Hall took advantage of the situation and seized control of the upper echelons of Flying Passage. In less than a day, they had taken over the entire Flying Passage. Flying Passage was the second largest gang in Jia Province. Even Leopard Pack, the largest gang in Jia Province, could not wipe them out. Yet, in less than a day, Falcon Hall, the weakest gang in Jia Province, had taken over Flying Passage and taken it under their name at lightning speed. Now that Falcon Hall had taken over Flying Passage's territory, it was only logical that they would become the second largest gang in Jia Province. In other words, all of Flying Passage's territory had been taken over by Falcon Hall. The black market was in an uproar when the news came out. At the same time, everyone knew that Flying Passage had planned to fight for territory with Falcon Hall. Since the fight did not go well, Flying Passage's boss, Su Zhouzheng, had sent someone to assassinate Falcon Hall's boss, slaying Luo. However, the sniper had hit the wrong person, causing Falcon Hall's former boss, Su Zetian, to take a bullet and almost die. Falcon Hall's new boss, slaying Luo, was enraged. She had gone to Flying Passage's headquarters alone and killed Su Zhouzheng, the boss, on her own. Then, she had taken advantage of Flying Passage's internal strife to take over the entire gang. Flying Passage's boss, Su Zhouzheng, had wanted to fight for Falcon Hall's territory because he had set his eyes on it. In the end, Falcon Hall's boss, slaying Luo, had taken over Flying Passage. Everyone in the black market was dumbfounded when they heard the news. Falcon Hall's new boss, slaying Luo, was not only a woman, but she also had such capabilities. Flying Passage was no pushover. However, which black market boss in Z country could be as ferocious as her? From now on, countless gang bosses would tremble in fear when they heard Yun Jian's name. Who would dare say that Yun Jian was a woman who relied on men to get to where she was now? Be careful. They would end up like Flying Passage. After Yun Jian and her men had taken over Flying Passage, the higher-ups of Falcon Hall were extremely busy. Of course, Yun Jian only led the higher-ups in the gang to take down Flying Passage. As for the final tidying up, she left that to Falcon Hall's higher-ups. At this moment, the higher-ups of Falcon Hall were beside themselves with excitement. Falcon Hall headquarters. Under Su Zifan's care, Su Zetian woke up in less than a day and a half. After finishing her work, Yun Jian went to Falcon Hall's headquarters to visit Su Zetian. At this time, Su Zifan had just finished nursing Su Zetian and left, and Su Zetian's wife had been staying by his side to serve him. It was the first time that Su Zetian's wife, Yun Jian, met her. Her name was Lin Wanru. She was also in her 40s, but she looked gentle and virtuous, like a lady from a scholarly family. Although Su Zetian was a gangster, he loved his wife dearly. In this lifetime, he only had Lin Wanru as his wife, and they only had one son, Su Haokol. In the gang, Su Zetian rarely allowed his wife, Lin Wanru, to come into contact with the black market. He protected his wife very well. There were not many people in the world who could do what Su Zetian did. Chapter 430. Just lie down. You don't have to get up, Yun Jian said with a wave of her hand. It was then that Su Zetian's urge to sit up was halted. Lin Wanru helped her husband lie back down considerately. Thank you, Sister Jian. Su Zetian had heard some stories while lying in bed these days. For example, it was Yun Jian who had saved his life. It was also Yun Jian who had gone to Flying Passage alone to wipe out his gang to avenge him. The gratitude in Su Zetian's heart couldn't be described with words. Back when Yun Jian asked for Falcon Hall, Su Zetian was still hesitant. Now, however, he would die a horrible death if he had second thoughts. Yun Jian had really led Falcon Hall out of Longmen City. Falcon Hall was now the second largest gang in Jia province. They were replacing the Sky Bridge gang. You don't have to thank me, Yun Jian said faintly. In spite of it, Su Zetian could feel her sincerity. Yun Jian did not know how to express herself, but she would use her actions to tell others and Su Zetian that she had taken him as one of her own. Yun Jian had always been protective of her own people. As long as someone offended her people, she would get rid of them as soon as possible. Rest well for the next few days. Go back to Falcon Hall after you've recovered, Yun Jian said. Yes. Su Zetian nodded heavily as he lay on the bed. He was accompanied by his wife, Lin Wanru, to Falcon Hall's headquarters today to look for Su Zifan to take care of him. Yun Jian had operated on him and stitched up the wound well. Su Zetian could basically walk with the help of others now, but his wound would not be torn apart as long as he did not move too much. Rest well then. I've passed your recent work to Duan Lei. I'll be away for a while before the new year and will be back after that. Yun Jian had arranged everything in an orderly manner. After saying that, she waited for Su Zetian to respond again before she turned around and left. Walking out of Falcon Hall's headquarters, someone suddenly caught up to her and called out to her. Yun Jian turned to see Lin Wanru jogging to catch up to her. Little girl, your name is Yun Jian, right? Thank you. Thank you for saving my husband. Although Lin Wanru was already in her 40s, she still looked very young. It was not an exaggeration to think that she was a young woman in her 20s or 30s. It was hard to imagine that this gentle, virtuous, and young-looking woman was Su Haokol's biological mother. I know my husband thanked you just now, but I still want to say thank you to you personally. Lin Wanru looked at Yun Jian sincerely. Yun Jian's pursed lips suddenly relaxed. She smiled slightly and responded to Lin Wanru's words. You're welcome. After returning from Falcon Hall, Yun Jian did not go home. She went to Lan Su's place first to inform him that she would not be coming back these few days before going to Qing Yu's house. When she went to Qing Yu's house today, she was the only one at home. As for her brother, Yun Jian guessed that he had probably gone for tutoring. Yun was a studious person, so he would go for tutoring during the winter break to improve his grades. Qing Yu ran to open the door and smiled when she saw Yun Jian. "Sister Jian, you're here. Are you done packing?" Yun Jian asked. "I'm ready. I'm ready to go any time." Qing Yu shook herself like she was relaxed and answered with a grin. On Qing Yu's side, Yun Jian had already found an excuse. Now, Yun Jian and Qing Yu were in a Ferrari sports car heading to the nearest airport. Chapter 431. The headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries was located on a mysterious island in Country M. As it was an internationally renowned mercenary organization, the location of its headquarters was well hidden. There was no direct bus to the headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries. Even if there was a transfer, there was no way to get there. Even from Country M to the island where the headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries was located, one had to cross a huge ocean to reach the island where the headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries was located. In her past life, Yun Jian had always flown a private helicopter back to the headquarters of the Wuxia mercenaries when she returned. It was just that those old fellows thought that something had happened to her and Yun Jian had not shown up for so long. She did not want to return in a high-profile manner. She wanted to catch them off guard. After buying a flight ticket to Country M at the airport of Wuxia Mountain, which was closest to Longmen City, Yun Jian sat in the departure lounge of the airport and waited. Qing Yu went to buy snacks while Yun Jian sat on the bench in the departure lounge with her eyes closed leisurely. There were not many people waiting to board the plane at the airport. In 1998, the airport was quite expensive. Ordinary people rarely took planes, so there were only a few types of people waiting to board the plane. There were mature white-collar workers in suits and leather shoes, well-dressed ladies, and some overseas students. In earlier years, people would usually travel by train instead of by plane. Yun Jian sat in the airport waiting for her flight when a sharp female voice suddenly rang in her ears. "Ah! You bumped into me. Do you have eyes? Oh my God! You even knocked my bag off. My bag is from Chanel. Can you afford to pay for it?" Yun Jian's eyes opened a little. She saw a rich lady in her 20s or 30s bending down to pick up a branded bag in the crowd and scolding an 18 or 19-year-old girl in a floral dress. "Yes. I'm sorry." The girl in the floral dress was startled and bowed to the rich lady, looking a little shaken. Yun Jian lost her interest at once with a glance. Naturally, other people's matters had nothing to do with her. Qing Yu came running back with a bucket of popcorn and passed it to Yun Jian with a fawning grin. "Sister Jian, try it. It's delicious. I just queued up for a long time." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and curled her lips slightly. She reached out to take one and tasted it. At this moment, the loudspeaker in the departure hall sounded. "Attention please, passengers. The plane to Country M's K-City is about to take off. Please proceed to the ticketing area to board the plane." A beautiful female voice sounded from the loudspeaker. Yun Jian carried her backpack and boarded the plane together with Qing Yu, who was carrying popcorn. They boarded the plane according to the order and Qing Yu sat close to the window. It was a row of 3 seats with Yun Jian sitting in the middle. There was an empty seat beside her. Yun Jian closed her eyes and rested for a while. At this moment, a hurried deng 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 sound was heard. Yun Jian felt something heavy hit her thigh. Opening her eyes slightly, she saw a girl in a floral dress speaking to her apologetically. "My luggage accidentally bumped into you just now. Sorry, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Yun Jian answered with a press of her lips. The girl in the floral dress was the one who had been scolded by the rich lady in the departure hall just now. Hearing Yun Jian's reply, the girl in the floral dress kept quiet. Chapter 432. Along the way, Yun Jian did not speak to the girl in the floral dress who sat on her right. The atmosphere was strangely strange. It was a 24-hour flight, so all 3 meals a day were served on the plane. By the time they got off the plane, it was already the next morning. Due to the time difference between Country M and Country Z, Yun Jian had boarded the plane yesterday evening. Now that 24 hours had passed, it was already morning in Country M, K City. After they got off the plane, Yun Jian and Qingyu changed buses. They were going to the harbor and take a boat out to the sea to reach the island closest to the Wuxia mercenaries' headquarters. They would then take a yacht back. The Wuxia mercenaries' headquarters was not a place that anyone could visit. In her past life, Yun Jian had flown a helicopter directly. Now that she planned to go back in a low-profile manner, she would have to go through a lot of twists and turns. Just as Yun Jian and Qingyu boarded the bus to the harbor, a surprised female voice came from behind them. "Hey, are you two going to the harbor as well?" The female voice sounded pleasantly surprised. Yun Jian turned around and saw the girl in the floral dress whom they had met on the plane. The girl in the floral dress was looking at Yun Jian and Qingyu in surprise, as if she had met a fellow countryman in another country and realized that they were traveling together. "Yeah, we're going to the harbor." Before Yun Jian could speak, Qingyu answered for Yun Jian. "What a coincidence. Can we go all the way?" "Hee, I'm Hua Meiling, what about you two?" The girl named Hua Meiling asked excitedly. "I'm Qingyu, she's Yun Jian," Qingyu answered on behalf of Yun Jian. They were considered familiar with each other now. On the bus to the harbor, Qingyu and Hua Meiling's laughter could be heard. Yun Jian would chime in occasionally as well. As they chatted, Hua Meiling told them about herself. She was going to the harbor to find her friends who had arrived there before them. They had decided to go to Heifei Island for a vacation. Hearing that Hua Meiling was going to Heifei Island, Yun Jian's eyes flashed. Heifei Island was a sacred vacation spot in M Nation. At the same time, it was the closest island to the Wuxia mercenaries' headquarters. Yun Jian and Qingyu had to pass by Heifei Island to take the yacht back to the Wuxia mercenaries' island. After taking the bus for 2 hours, they arrived at the harbor. As soon as she got out of the car, a group of young men and women in their late teens came over to greet Hua Meiling. "They are my friends," Hua Meiling introduced them to Yun Jian and Qingyu. Hua Meiling then introduced Yun Jian and Qingyu to her friends. "This is Qingyu, and this is Yun Jian. We bumped into each other on the way, and it just so happens that we are both going to Heifei Island, so let's go together. Hello, two little beauties, my name is Zhang Ziyuan. Can I be your friend?" Hee. A handsome young man of about 18 or 19 walked over to greet Yun Jian and Qingyu with a grin. Someone slapped Zhang Ziyuan from the side and teased, "Ziyuan, get lost. Your real girlfriend is still here and you dare to tease her little sister? Are you tired of living?" Ha! Hua Meiling's group of friends immediately started laughing noisily. "They're just like that. Don't mind them," Hua Meiling said to Yun Jian and Qingyu with a smile. "It's fine." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and looked at the ground, feeling an unfriendly gaze on her and Qingyu. From the corner of her eyes, she saw an elegantly dressed, sweet-looking girl standing behind the laughing group, glaring at Yun Jian and Qingyu with disgust. Chapter 433. Yun Jian had experienced this gaze countless times, be it in her previous life or after her rebirth, so she ignored it. "Right, it's Sis Yun Jian and Sis Qingyu's first time here for a vacation, right? Do you want me to be your guide?" Zhang Ziyuan, who was done fooling around with his friends, went to Yun Jian and Qingyu to ask. Even the way he addressed them had become more intimate. She had heard from Hua Meiling that her group of friends were studying at a university in K City in Country M. Hua Meiling had come here alone this time to travel. As Zhang Ziyuan and his friends who had been studying here for a long time, they naturally felt like locals welcoming outsiders. "No need. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and declined decisively. Although Zhang Ziyuan had struck up a conversation with both Yun Jian and Qing Yu just now, he was more inclined toward Yun Jian. Therefore, he was taken aback when Yun Jian rejected him so decisively. So there are times when our K University's top students get rejected by girls too. A boy beside them commented coincidentally. After that, Yun Jian could clearly feel Fan Weiwei's murderous gaze on her. At this time, the group of people also realized that what the boy said just now was too inappropriate. Moreover, Zhang Ziyuan's real girlfriend, Fan Weiwei, was right beside them. How dare he say that? In spite of it, Zhang Ziyuan did not mind at all. He even invited Yun Jian and Qing Yu again, only to be rejected by Yun Jian once more. The more unobtainable something was, the more he wanted it. Zhang Ziyuan's interest in Yun Jian was piqued. The group boarded the cruise ship to Heifei Islet at the harbor, each with their own thoughts. Heifei Islet was a famous scenic spot, so it was crowded with people. Sister Jian, are we going back to the organization directly or? When they arrived at Heifei Islet, Qing Yu went to Yun Jian and asked softly while Hua Meiling and the others were admiring the scenery. Just go back, Yun Jian answered without hesitation. She was not here for a vacation, so there was no need for her to go sightseeing with Hua Meiling and her friends. Just as Yun Jian said that, Hua Meiling who was walking in front called out to them, Yun Jian, Qing Yu, come quick. What are you standing there for? Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and caught up to them with Qing Yu. The island of Heifei Island was very vast. There was an area with a beach. Since it was winter, there were not many people swimming in the sea. It was not that there were none. Yun Jian and Qing Yu wanted to leave as soon as they arrived. But Hua Meiling and her friends were already having fun on the beach. At this moment, the sound of a gunshot rang out beside everyone's ears. Everyone was taken aback. Then, they saw a huge cruise ship coming ashore. On the side of the cruise ship, there was a unique skull imprinted on it. That was the symbol of the Kosha mercenaries. Yun Jian's eyes twitched as she pressed her lips together without saying a word. Hua Meiling's confused voice came from the side, what was that sound just now? This cruise ship is so weird. Why is there a skull on it? At this moment, the stairs on the cruise ship reached the ground, and a man in strange clothes walked down with a Browning pistol in his hand. There was a large group of people following behind him. These people had unique skulls printed on their wrists. At this moment, when everyone standing on the beach saw the man who suddenly appeared with a pistol in his hand, they were so scared that they screamed one after another. Ah! Gun! He has a gun! Someone exclaimed. But before the man could finish screaming, he was killed by the man holding the Browning pistol with a bang. Life was worthless. That was how the saying went. Hua Meiling and her friends paled in fright. Chapter 434. The man who had screamed just now was killed by the man with the gun. Hua Meiling and the rest had never seen anything like this before. They covered their mouths in fear, not daring to make a sound. The crowd was already in a frenzy. Some of them reacted quickly and turned to run. Bang, bang, bang. The man with the Browning pistol fired mercilessly at the fleeing group. Screams, kill. Run, kill. For a moment, everyone was dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. They were overwhelmed by fear in the next second. Who was this man? How could he kill so brazenly? Everyone was clamoring in their hearts. At the same time, they were regretting why they had appeared here today. The gun in the man's hand was a pistol. A real gun. He had shot and killed someone. Everyone, if you run away again, don't blame my bullets for being blind. The man shouted with the Browning pistol in his hand. He shot and killed several foreigners. It was as if killing was as simple as eating and sleeping to him. Devil! Hua Meiling and the rest muttered in their hearts. Then, they began to tremble in fear. The man with the gun had spoken in English, but Hua Meiling, Yun Jian, and Qing Yu did not have a language barrier. Not long after, everyone present began to tremble. They were afraid that they would encounter something like this. They all trembled and tried to hide behind their companions. Sister Jian, he's Tullage subordinate, say Bayer. He's ranked 31st in the organization. Qing Yu went close to Yun Jian and whispered into her ear. Tullage was one of the old men of the Kosha mercenaries who was often mentioned. He had a place in the Kosha mercenaries and was also the most loyal subordinate of the previous boss of the Kosha mercenaries. This man with the gun named Seibayer was Tullage's subordinate, which meant that he was Yun Jian's enemy. When Zhang Ziyuan saw Yun Jian and Qing Yu leaning against each other, he thought that they were scared. Therefore, he abandoned his girlfriend, Fan Weiwei, and went to Yun Jian to speak to Yun Jian and Qing Yu in concern. Don't be scared, I'm here. Qing Yu stopped talking to Yun Jian when she saw Zhang Ziyuan coming over. Zhang Ziyuan thought that Yun Jian and Qing Yu were scared instead, so he spread his arms and used his body to hide them behind him. Zhang Ziyuan's action allowed Yun Jian and Qing Yu to avoid Seibayer's gaze. Seibayer looked around and saw that everyone around him was looking at him with fear, which made him even more arrogant. You, come over here. At this moment, Seibayer suddenly caught sight of Hua Meiling, who was wearing a floral dress. He looked at Hua Meiling lecherously and hooked his finger at her. Seibayer of the Kosha mercenaries, ranked 31st, was a promiscuous bully. Hua Meiling was terrified. She stood where she was and shook her head, shrunk into herself nervously. Her action infuriated Seibayer. F***ck, woman, I'm flattering you by asking you to come over here. You shameless B***tch, F***ck. Seibayer growled, but he did not kill her directly since he had not tasted Hua Meiling yet. He ran over in an attempt to grab Hua Meiling. Hua Meiling was even more frightened by the turn of events. She shrunk into herself and leaned against Fan Weiwei behind her. A glint flashed across Fan Weiwei's eyes. She thought viciously that it was Hua Meiling who had provoked Yun Jian and Qing Yu. Therefore, Fan Weiwei steeled her heart and pushed Hua Meiling toward Seibayer. Just as Hua Meiling was about to be caught by Seibayer, the crowd saw a silhouette flash by. Seibayer's hand that reached for Hua Meiling's chicken claw was broken by Yun Jian, who appeared out of nowhere. Chapter 435. F***ck. Seibayer, who was kicked in the abdomen, groaned and fell to the ground. The place was silent as everyone stared unblinkingly at the petite silhouette. Everyone's eyes were glued to Yun Jian without exception. Seibayer was a well-built adult man while Yun Jian was only a 15-year-old girl. Moreover, Yun Jian had been standing behind Zhang Ziyuan earlier. In that split second, she had appeared in front of the crowd and kicked Seibayer, who was holding a gun, away at an astonishing speed. The scene shocked the entire place. Yun Jian. She. Zhang Ziyuan had stood in front of Yun Jian and Qing Yu with his arms open, thinking that they were afraid of this scene. He did not expect Yun Jian to be so agile. Zhang Ziyuan and the rest were dumbfounded. Hua Meiling was equally stunned. She stared blankly at Yun Jian, who was standing in front of her. She had witnessed Yun Jian's kick to Seibayer the clearest. Seibayer's abdomen, which was kicked by Yun Jian, caved in at the same time. What kind of strength did Yun Jian have to be able to kick a living person's abdomen to the point where it caved in? Hua Meiling was completely dumbfounded. She did not even think that she would have to escape with Yun Jian in her current situation. F***ck. Seibayer, who was kicked away, was stronger than anyone Yun Jian had met before. He stood up with a low growl. None of the Kosha mercenaries were weak. It was not something some of the people Yun Jian had met before could compare to. UB***tch. How dare you kick me? Do you know who I am? I want you dead. Seibeir glanced at Yunjian's face greedily. He growled, but his eyes were fixed on Yunjian without blinking. With a growl from Seibeir, the group of people behind him ran up and surrounded Yunjian and Hua Meiling, who was standing behind Yunjian with their guns raised. Yunjian could clearly feel Hua Meiling's momentary fear. She held on to the corner of Yunjian's shirt and sobbed, "What? What should we do? Yunjian, what should we do? Are we going to die?" "Shut up," Yunjian growled at Hua Meiling. Yunjian then turned to face Seibeir with her delicate side profile. Seibeir, 35 years old. Belongs to Gu Sha mercenaries, ranked 31st in the organization, one of Elder Tullidge's subordinates. Yunjian spoke to Seibeir mechanically as if she was reporting information. When everyone present heard this, they didn't know what to do. Kosha mercenaries? Most of the commoners had never come into contact with these assassin and secret agent organizations. Therefore, it was not surprising that most of them did not know. A well-behaved girl like Hua Meiling had never come into contact with these. However, Yunjian's words sounded different to Seibeir's ears. His information was kept confidential whether it was within or outside the Kosha mercenaries. How did this girl know about it? Seibeir frowned and snarled. His malicious gaze turned as eerie as a falcon's. "Damn it, you must die!" Seibeir roared at Yunjian. He even raised the Browning pistol that he had picked up after standing up and pointed it at Yunjian. "How dare you? Seibeir, how dare you act rashly in front of me?" It was then that Qingyu slipped out from behind Zhang Ziyuan. Looking at Seibeir, her mischievous tone was gone as she hollered, "Brother Seibeir." Chapter 436. Qingyu was also a member of the Kosha mercenaries and held a high position. Qingyu might not be ranked among the Kosha mercenaries based on her ability, but her poison skills were even better than the Kosha mercenaries' top leader, Snake. Lizard. Qingyu was also trained by Snake. Lizard. More importantly, Qingyu was the one who followed the Kosha mercenaries' boss. Therefore, Qingyu's position was not something the common folk could compare to. As for the Kosha mercenaries' boss, even Seibeir did not have the chance to meet her, let alone the common folk who had never seen her face. Other than Yunjian's most trusted subordinates, even the higher-ups of the Kosha mercenaries had never seen her face. In her past life, Yunjian would wear a human skin mask whenever she met the higher-ups of the Kosha mercenaries or those old fellows. Moreover, it was a different face every time. Therefore, these old fellows still did not know what she looked like in her past life. Yunjian's height in her past life was about the same as her current height. Therefore, Yunjian was not worried that anyone would find out about her rebirth. This was why the Kosha mercenaries' boss was so mysterious. Back to the topic, when Seibeir saw Qingyu's face clearly, he was dumbfounded. With Qingyu's position in the Kosha mercenaries, Seibeir could not afford to offend her. Why are you here?" Seibeir's attitude took a 360-degree turn. He even walked up to Qingyu and lowered his body to ask. Looking at Seibeir's reaction, Hua Meiling, Fan Weiwei, and Zhang Ziyuan were dumbfounded. All the tourists at the scene were completely stunned. Everyone looked at Qingyu in shock, as well as Seibeir, who had suddenly become respectful in front of her. Who was this little girl? How could she make Seibeir, who was so arrogant just a moment ago, submit to her in an instant? "Bastard, you've offended the person I respect the most. You don't deserve to know." Qingyu raised her hand and slapped Seibeir hard. Everyone sucked in a breath of air. Everyone had witnessed Seibeir's killing spree. He was a demon. The people who were killed by Seibeir were killed for no reason at all, even though they hadn't done anything wrong. Now, Qingyu had slapped him. However, Seibeir was not angry. Not only did he not dare to be angry, he even apologized to Qingyu. This was the hierarchy of Kosha mercenaries. Sabayer dared not act rashly because Qingyu's position in the Kosha mercenaries was higher than his. It would be a piece of cake for Qingyu to kill Saibel. Just when everyone thought that the matter was about to come to an end, a pleasant and indifferent voice was heard unhurriedly, "Kill him." Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw Yunjian pursing her lips slightly. She calmly spat out 3 words. However, these 3 words caused everyone to turn pale with fright. Even Saibel was stunned. What right did she have to dictate his life and death? Qingyu accepted the order with her eyes lowered. She looked at Sabayer from the corner of her eyes as if she was looking at a dead man. Sabayer was frightened by her gaze. He knew Qingyu. She was a master of poison. The poison she created could turn a person's body into bones instantly. This was one of the main reasons why he was afraid of Qingyu. Kill who? I'd like to see who dares. Right then, the humming sound of a helicopter's huge wings came from the sky. Then, an old man in his 50s or 60s jumped down from the helicopter. This person was the subordinate of the Kosha mercenaries' previous boss, Tulij. Saibel was his man. Chapter 437. Tulij was an old man in his 50s or 60s. He had a ferocious face, but it was not hard to tell that he was not good-looking when he was younger. However, even though he was already very old, when he first appeared, he still shocked everyone present. Especially when Tulij came down from a private helicopter. His actions were exactly like the villains in the movies. Hua Meiling, Zhang Ziyuan, Fan Weiwei, and the rest were rooted to the spot, completely dumbfounded. Not only the few of them, but the people on the beach were also overwhelmed by fear. This was because not long after Tulij appeared, a large group of men in black uniforms with machine guns in their hands appeared in front of them. More importantly, their wrists were exposed. There was a unique skull-shaped symbol on their wrists that sent chills down one's spine. Most of the people present did not know the meaning of the symbol. However, due to their instincts towards danger, a sense of fear arose in their hearts when they saw the markings on the wrists of these people. Elder Tulij. Sabayer was pleasantly surprised. Seeing that his elder had come to his rescue, he was no longer afraid of Qingyu and quickly went to stand beside Tulij. Tulij had been with the Kosha mercenaries longer than Qingyu. Even though Qingyu and Tulij were of the same rank, Tulij's appeal in the Kosha mercenaries was still slightly higher than Qingyu's. On the other hand, Qingyu was standing beside Yunjian. Both parties stared at each other. Currently, Tulij was looking at Yunjian insolently. His aged face looked like it was crawling with centipedes, looking ferocious and terrifying. However, when Tulij was sizing up Yunjian, he felt the terrifying aura emanating from Yunjian. The aura sent chills down Tulij's spine. Because he, Tulij, had only experienced this kind of aura from one person. However, from what he knew, that person would not appear here. She had been missing for a long time. When Slaying God went missing, Tulij had even sent people to conduct a large-scale search. In the end, they only managed to find Slaying God's favorite sports car, the Ferrari LaFerrari. But this person had mysteriously disappeared just like that. Then, he disappeared without a trace. In fact, they hadn't seen each other for almost half a year. What did it mean if a person on this path disappeared for half a year for no reason? There was only one explanation: she was already dead. After coming to this conclusion, Tulij and the others were fearless. Recently, they couldn't sit still. Since that woman was already dead. In that case, the Kosha mercenaries should not be under that woman's command. Therefore, Tulij's men began to ignore the Kosha mercenaries' rules on a large scale. Because he wanted to make a comeback and make his own decisions. Who are you? Tulij pressed his lips together and squinted at Evil Eye. There was a hint of murderous intent in his malevolent gaze as he asked Yunjian. Tullidge, you don't deserve to know. Qing Yu spat at Tullidge and answered on behalf of Yunjian. Yunjian merely narrowed her eyes. Tullidge? Are you Elder Tullidge from the Kosha Mercenaries, the #1 mercenary organization in the world? Right then, a deep, mature male voice that had been silent for a long time was heard. There was a deep sense of horror and shock in it. As soon as the mature man's terrified voice rang out, everyone present understood what he meant. A mercenary organization. Was that not an organization that killed people? It was the #1 in the world. Everyone's eyes widened in shock. Hua Meiling and the rest looked at Tullidge and his men in horror. When they turned to look at Yunjian, their eyes were filled with worry. Chapter 438. Hua Meiling and the rest were university students while Zhang Ziyuan, Fan Weiwei, and the rest were studying in a local university in Country M. How could they have ever seen such a terrifying scene? Hua Meiling and the rest were so scared that their legs turned to jelly when Seibert shot and killed a bunch of people. Now, after hearing that Seibert and Tullidge were from the #1 mercenary group in the world, he was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. Just like the introduction in the movie, the people in this underground mercenary group were all demons who killed without batting an eyelid. Human lives were worthless in their hands. Hence, everyone present was so scared that their legs turned to jelly and a chill ran down their spines. Seibert's killing spree proved one thing. That was, it was very likely that none of the people present would be able to make it out alive. Oh my God! If they had known that they would encounter such a terrifying incident today, they would never have come to Heifei Island for a vacation. However, the most impossible thing in this world was medicine for regret. The words of the mature man with a low voice earlier caused a stir in the crowd, but it did not affect Tullidge and Yunjian who were looking at each other. Yunjian's slightly pursed lips curled up slightly in the next second, forming a stunning smile. She did not expect to meet Tullidge and the rest on Heifei Island. She also did not expect that Tullidge and the rest of the old men could not wait to disregard the Kosha mercenaries' rules and wreak havoc when she was out in the world for half a year. The Kosha mercenaries had a clear rule that they were not allowed to kill people on a large scale for no reason. Not only would it attract the police's attention, but it would also cause a lot of trouble if they were to clash with the international police force. Now, she had only disappeared for half a year and Tullidge was already disregarding the Kosha mercenaries' rules. Tullidge, you're good. Yunjian gritted her teeth and gave Tullidge a cruel smile as she spoke. No one could tell what she meant. However, Tullidge's eyelids twitched. She was just a little girl. Although she looked similar to Slaying God, so what? Tullidge firmly believed that Yunjian was dead. Although Tullidge had never seen Yunjian's face in her previous life, he could sense her. Moreover, Slaying God had survived a hail of bullets while the little girl in front of him was beautiful and her hands were fair and delicate. It was impossible for Slaying God, who wielded weapons all the time, to have such fair hands. Therefore, even when Qing Yu was standing next to Yunjian, Tullidge had never associated Yunjian with his Kosha mercenaries' boss, Slaying God. I am very good, but little girl, you. Something bad might happen. Tullidge smiled savagely. He stared at Yunjian with a trace of cunning and cruel killing intent. No matter who this little girl was, she had to die. Tullidge laughed sinisterly. He waved his hand and gestured to his men who were holding machine guns. The gesture was an order for them to open fire and kill everyone present, including Yunjian and Qing Yu. Just as Tullidge raised his hand to give the order, a racing car flashed past them. The car was like a bolt of lightning that flashed past them and stopped beside Yunjian. Screech. The car's tires screeched loudly. Then, two people alighted from the car. One of them was tall and sturdy, and his strong body was nearly 2 meters tall. The other had a voluptuous body but wore a tight black shapewear. The former was Tiger. Leopard whom Yunjian had contacted when she was reborn. The latter was Snake. Lizard who had appeared not long ago. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.